You're not asleep yet. That's fine. Right now, somewhere in the dark beneath you, the earth opens wide. It stretches and shudders with pressure no human body could survive. Miles of black salt water press down on the seafloor so heavy that steel crumples so deep that light just gives up. Sonar fails. Maps lie. And every once in a while, a machine designed to explore that place vanishes. Not lost, just no longer answering. You're lying in bed, maybe under blankets, maybe listening to the hum of your fan or the soft buzz of the room around you. But miles away in the endless cold, off the Patagonian coast or down in the Mariana Trench, there's a silence no fan can fill. And in that silence, something moves. It doesn't blink. It doesn't surface. It watches from below. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments, because tonight, you're not the only one trying to fall asleep to this. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, but we've mapped more of the moon than we have of the seafloor. You probably already knew that most people do. But did you know how much of it we've actually seen with our own eyes? Less than 5%. Everything else blind guesses, low-resolution sonar images, and the occasional underwater drone that just doesn't come back. Sometimes we blame currents, sometimes battery failure, sometimes the weight of water itself, and sometimes we blame nothing, because nothing makes more sense than what we did find. Submarines that return without their crew, drones that surface in places they could never have drifted, strange pulses recorded on deep-sea microphones, always from the same trench, always the same tone, as if they're waiting for someone to respond. The ocean has patterns that don't come from waves or whales. They come from somewhere else, somewhere deep, somewhere old. Historians still debate whether early deep-sea encounters in the 1970s were just mechanical failure, or if something else was listening back. But whatever it was, it didn't leave a signature, just a cold, tight silence. A dent in a hull, a missing log, a shape that never appeared on radar, but still left its mark. You're going to hear about the AR San Juan, a real submarine that disappeared off the coast of South America. You'll learn about a drone named Iris 15 that sent one last message before vanishing not alone. You'll follow submersibles that surfaced intact with their crews gone, and stories from undersea black boxes that no one can explain. There's no real beginning to this story, and no certain end. Just the sound of the sea, the pressure of the deep, and the mysteries that science still cannot explain. Now close your eyes. We're going down. The sea holds its breath in silence far beneath the roar of the surface. You sink now, slow and steady, past the froth and light into a world where shadows don't move, but you do. Here time stretches, sound warps, and history, when it disappears, stays disappeared. You land near the southern coast of Argentina, a place stitched together by jagged cliffs, empty beaches, and wind that never seems to sleep. The water here is steel gray and bone cold, swept by the crashing churn of the South Atlantic. This is the last edge of the world, Patagonia. And out past the waves, one submarine, one entire crew, slipped into the deep and never came back. The AR San Juan. Now you might remember the headlines: a lost vessel, 44 souls, weeks of silence, A desperate search. A few bleeps on sonar. And then nothing. Until much later, wreckage was found in the dark, flattened like a soda can under the heel of God. But that's just the press version. You're here for what they didn't explain. The AR San Juan wasn't some experimental death trap. She was a trusted veteran. Diesel-electric TR 1700 class, German-built, refurbished, reliable. Not flashy, not nuclear, but solid. This sub had weathered the sea for over 30 years. Her mission in November 2017, simple patrol, Argentina's southern waters, check equipment, return home. In and out, she departed from Ushuaia, the southernmost city in the world. Nestled by snow-capped peaks in the Beagle Channel, it's the last stop before Antarctica. Her crew, 44 men and women, were experienced, disciplined. Some had served for decades. One, the country's first female submarine officer, a national point of pride. Then came the last transmission, 7:30 a.m., November 15th. Brief, professional. A small issue reported seawater had leaked through the snorkel into the forward battery compartment. Short circuit. One battery was down. Compartment isolated, continuing on backup. That's it. No panic, no distress, just a little water where it didn't belong. That message was the last time anyone heard from the AR San Juan. Then came the silence. The Argentine Navy waited. Then they hoped. Then they feared. Within 48 hours, a search and rescue operation launched massive international. The United States, the UK, Chile, Russia, Norway, all sent vessels, planes, deep sea equipment. Companies donated tech. Satellite networks combed the surface. But the sea kept quiet. And then 9 days later, a strange discovery. The kind that doesn't answer questions so much as sharpen them. An underwater acoustic anomaly was detected at 10:51 a.m. on the day the sub disappeared, just over 3 hours after that final message. The sound came from deep 400 kilometers off the Patagonian coast. It was sharp, brief, like a single balloon popping in the dark. Not the drawn-out groan of a ship breaking up. Not the slow-motion crush of hull collapse. Just boom. And silence again. This sound was picked up by the CTBTO, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. These are the people who monitor the world for nuclear blasts. Their underwater hydrophones are some of the most sensitive on Earth. They didn't call it an explosion. They called it an implosion, like acoustic event. What does that even mean? That's where things start to get weird. An implosion should sound like a drawn-out metallic crush, like steel folding under tons of pressure. But the waveform they recorded wasn't drawn out. It was narrow, high frequency, sudden, crisp. Some experts said it sounded more like cracking ice, or maybe a shaped charge. Like something designed not just to collapse, but to collapse fast, controlled, precise. So if it wasn't an implosion, what was it? A few theories emerged. Some said hydrogen buildup. That battery failure could have created explosive gas in the forward compartment. If that gas ignited, even a small bang could have compromised the pressure hull. Once the integrity goes, everything else happens fast. Water floods in. Steel buckles. Air compresses into superheated plasma. The crew wouldn't even have time to shout. But even that theory didn't match the audio signature. Others wondered, had the San Juan hit something? A seamount, an abandoned net, or another vessel? You can probably see where this is going. Some started whispering about foreign subs, covert encounters. Maybe the San Juan was shadowing someone else and got too close. Maybe it wasn't a failure. Maybe it was a warning. No Navy admitted anything. the Argentine Navy's official line, implosion from electrical malfunction and flooding. But the families weren't convinced. Some said crew members had reported issues before launch. Others believed maintenance had been rushed, corners cut, warnings ignored, then silence. For a year, until November 17, 2018, Ocean Infinity, a private company contracted to continue the search, located the wreck. There she was, broken into 3 major pieces. Sitting quietly at the bottom, 900 meters down, crushed like a tin can. But something was wrong. There were no scorch marks, no signs of explosion, no impact scars. The pressure hull was flattened, yes, but the surrounding structure didn't match the violence that an internal hydrogen blast would have left behind. It was as if the sub had been squeezed, not ripped, not burned, squeezed. In that location, it wasn't even that far from where she was last heard. Just deep, quiet, overlooked. Why didn't they find her sooner? Why didn't the emergency beacon deploy? Where was the distress signal? Why, in the age of global satellites, did a steel sub filled with sensors just disappear? Historians still debate whether it was a cascade of bad engineering or something else. Some experts say the crew never had time to respond. Others believe the fail-safes didn't activate because they were manually overridden or fried electronically before they could. And then there's the waveform. That strange, sharp sound like a finger snap from the abyss. No one knows what it was. A few years later, deep-sea analysts would find other anomalous sounds in the South Atlantic, short bursts, tight frequencies, directional pulses with no known source. But none of them explained what happened to the AR San Juan. The sub still lies down there, sealed in pressure, watched over by nothing but darkness and salt. A graveyard no one dares disturb. Not for research, not for answers. By request of the families, the wreck remains untouched. And so the questions stay with us. What exactly caused that sound? Why didn't the crew get a final word? Why was the wreck so close and still invisible for a full year? And what else might be waiting out there just beneath where the maps end? Down here, steel breaks, time halts, and not everything surfaces again. You blink, and the scene shifts again. Now you're gliding through the inky waters of a Norwegian fjord. Not the crashing ocean this time. No storms, no pressure spikes, just stillness. A flat gray sky above. Mountains rising like teeth from both sides. Water so calm, it reflects the clouds like a mirror. This is the Oslo fjord. Peaceful, scenic, mapped for decades. There are lighthouses here, traffic buoys, ferry crossings, and cozy coastal towns with bright red roofs, and fishermen who complain about the price of fuel more than the weather. And right in the middle of this polite postcard of a landscape, one of the most advanced submarines in Northern Europe lost its mind. It didn't break, it didn't crash, it just forgot where it was. In the spring of 2018, a Norwegian Navy submarine was on a routine coastal patrol through the Oslo fjord. Nothing dramatic, just standard recon. Check radar monitor civilian traffic, and test a few updated nav systems. This wasn't a relic either. It was an Ula-class, sub-sleek, quiet diesel-electric purpose, built for operations in Norway's narrow, frigid coastal waters. These subs are small but stealthy, hardened, designed to navigate undersea valleys and slip silently past enemy sensors. And they're equipped with some of the best inertial and satellite-based navigation systems anywhere in the world. So losing track of where you are in a place like this, it shouldn't be possible. And yet, it happened. About 30 minutes into their dive, the crew noticed something odd. Their digital compass wasn't updating. The inertial navigation system, the one that tracks motion without relying on external signals, had started blinking error codes. Nothing major, just a hiccup, they thought. But then it wasn't just one system, it was all of them. Compass dead, inertial nav glitching, GPS offline, and not just offline, completely blank. No location, no drift path, no signal loss warning, just empty. They tried restarting the systems, nothing. They switched to emergency backups, still nothing. Then the communications suite went dark. All signals in and out gone. The crew couldn't talk to anyone above. Water couldn't ping. The base couldn't even send a basic status code. Just silence. 12 minutes passed. Now, in normal submarine time, 12 minutes is nothing. But in this case, 12 minutes was forever. Because during that time, the sub had no way of knowing its own position. Dead reckoning didn't work. Sensors weren't tracking movement. There were no nearby obstacles, but there were still hazards, depth changes, seafloor shelves, civilian traffic. And when systems finally rebooted, when the displays lit back up and GPS signals returned, the crew found something even stranger. The submarine had moved 30 meters, not downward, not diagonally, just straight, sideways. According to the internal logs, the vessel had experienced no propulsion, no steering input, no change in ballast. But their position had shifted in a perfectly linear path, like it had been nudged. No acceleration, no jolt, no water movement, just relocation. As if a ghost had gently picked it up and put it somewhere else. And when the officers ran the diagnostics reviewed, sonar checked external feeds, they found nothing. No pressure waves, no drag currents, no sign of turbulence. The water had remained undisturbed. The ocean, in other words, had not behaved like an ocean. That's when the higher-ups got involved. The incident was flagged immediately by command. What was first logged as a sensor malfunction was quietly upgraded to a full systems review. Within the week, a formal investigation was underway, but that investigation never made it to the public. Officially, the report called it a multi-layer navigational failure with unknown contributing factors. But internally, among those who read the unredacted version, the incident earned a nickname, the Oslo fjord blackout. Here's the problem. Modern subs aren't like airplanes. They don't rely on one big computer. They use layered systems, redundant, shielded, compartmentalized. If one fails, the others step in. But in this case, all of them failed simultaneously. That's not how failure works. That's how interference works. Engineers tried everything. They tested for electromagnetic bursts, solar flares, radiation, lightning, geological quirks, even acoustic interference from passing vessels. Nothing. There were no storms that day, no seismic activity, no nearby military drills. The only thing surrounding the submarine was silence. And then someone in the room said it half joking, half serious. What if it wasn't us? That's when the older sailors started swapping stories. Because this wasn't the first time something weird had happened in these waters. Decades earlier, during the Cold War, there were reports of sonar drift in the fjords, compass needles spinning without cause, shortwave radios cutting out near specific cliffs, always explained away. Atmospheric conditions, electrical faults, operator error, but none of them had left a scar like this. Because the thing is, you can't really fake movement. The sub's log said it had moved 30 meters. The GPS confirmed it. The crew hadn't felt a thing, but the ocean had moved them. So what could have done that? Well, here's where the theories get spicy. Theory 1. coordinated software glitch, a hidden fault deep in the sub's firmware corrupting data across all layers. It's possible, but the chance of every system failing in sync is astronomically low. These systems are designed for war. They don't crash together. Theory 2, electromagnetic distortion, a localized anomaly, a magnetic knot in the fjord's geology, could interfere with sensors. But no such knot has ever been mapped in this region, and geological surveys post-incident found nothing unusual. Theory 3, classified interference, a military spoofing test, jamming signals to simulate blindness. But even if true, why not warn the crew? Why risk their safety? And if it was a test, it succeeded too well. Nobody could explain what happened. Then there's theory 4, the one no one wants to write down, that something touched the sub, not physically, but spatially. That something outside of us, not technological, not geological, reached in and moved it, just a little, just to see if it could. You don't need to believe that. Most people don't, but the logs remain. The movement was real. The blackout was real. And the silence was louder than any engine. The fjord has gone quiet again. Nothing else has happened there officially, but some say that incident changed policy. That certain naval paths now avoid the center line of the Oslo fjord. That sub-patrols now pass through quickly, not slowly. That no one wants to stop and wait too long where the water went still. So maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the sea twitched. Or maybe you're not always the only thing moving in the dark. You drift now from the cold stillness of the Oslo fjord into something deeper. Not north this time, but west. Farther from land. Down into the mid-Atlantic ridge where the seafloor is shaped like a scar, and the silence is so complete, your heartbeat might echo louder than a sonar ping. We're near the Azores now, an ancient volcanic archipelago rising from tectonic violence. Above the skies are blue. Tourists sip espresso in pastel-painted villages. But down below, it's all basalt and blackness. Here, where 3 continental plates grind like ancient machinery, the earth is cracked wide open. And one spring morning in 2021, something moved down there. Something that noticed it was being watched. Something that sent back a reply. This is the story of Iris 15, a drone that dove into the trench, sent a 4-word message, and never came back. Approaching structure. Movement detected. Not alone. And then silence. Let's rewind. The IRIS project was a collaboration between France's National Center for Scientific Research and its Portuguese and Spanish counterparts. Their goal to map tectonic anomalies along the mid-Atlantic ridge and investigate strange acoustic readings recorded in the area since the early 2000s. You might think, well, that sounds nice. But the place they were exploring wasn't exactly a sunny reef. It was Sector AB02, an unmapped trench system near the western flanks of the Azores Plateau. It's a bad place. Volcanic. Unstable. Deep. Satellites had picked up weird thermal patterns there, not volcanic exactly, but irregular. As if the heat was coming and going in waves like a breath held too long and then exhaled in slow motion. Enter Iris 15. It wasn't the first of its kind, but it was the most advanced. An AUV, autonomous underwater vehicle equipped with high-end sonar magnetometers and an onboard AI called Valo, trained to navigate and react without human control. It didn't need a tether. It didn't need a pilot. It just dropped into the dark and went looking for questions science had stopped trying to answer. Iris 15 launched at 12:04 a.m. On April 12th, 2021, its descent was calm. At 400 meters, sonar sweep engaged. At 800 meters, magnetic anomalies detected. By dawn, it had reached 200 meters. Still fine. Then the data started getting weird. Low-level rhythmic acoustic patterns. Every 11 minutes. Not tectonic, not volcanic, not biological. Valo tagged them as structured noise. Not enough to trigger alerts, but just suspicious. Like footsteps muffled by distance. Then it captured images, a steep trench wall, lined with structures, not natural curves, but straight lines. Right angles. Pillars. Almost architectural. Valo rerouted, slowed down, then came the final ping. Approaching structure. Movement detected. Attached to the transmission was a blurry still. Low light. Shadows. A dark mass in the lower third of the frame. No scale, no context, just motion. And then 5 seconds later, another message. Not alone. Then nothing. Ping stopped. Logs went dead. The drone had vanished. Now these drones don't go quiet easily. They're designed to survive catastrophic failure. Even if destroyed, they release beacons. Surface if power fails. Broadcast blind if jammed. Iris 15 did none of those things. The surface ship, Pourquoi Pas, tried to locate it for 72 hours. They launched backup ROVs, searched the whole area, found no wreckage, no beacon, no acoustic signal. It was like the ocean had simply eaten it. The official report said catastrophic navigational failure due to seafloor collision or pressure breach. Internally, no one bought it. So what did Iris 15 actually see? Well, before that final message, its logs show something chilling. AI recursion loops. Valo kept reanalyzing the same blurry images over and over again, trying to identify a moving shape, attempting to categorize it, but failing. That's not normal behavior. Valo's protocols are built to detect predators, avoid obstacles, and move on. But it didn't. It paused, froze, and then wrote, "Not alone." Let me put this bluntly. Valo wasn't designed to feel fear, but it was programmed to recognize threat behavior, to treat movement patterns as hostile or neutral. Whatever it saw triggered its threat protocols, and not from a ship or known organism, from something else. So let's talk theories. Theory 1: submarine lava vents. A sudden burst of undersea volcanic activity could have created distortion. False sonar readings maybe destroyed the drone outright, except no seismic activity was recorded. Theory 2: uncharted terrain. It struck a ridge, broke apart, sank, except it had cutting-edge sonar and collision detection. And again, no debris, no echo. Theory 3: electromagnetic interference. An undersea current or energy pulse scrambled its circuits, except no spike, no record. And then there's the stranger evidence. The one fragment of video recovered from Iris 15 before signal loss shows a smooth convex surface, glinting with faint light. Organic maybe, but it's reflective, curved, massive, possibly scaled. Some say it's a fluke, lens flare. Others say it looked like a flank, not a wall, not a rock, but something breathing. And that's not the creepiest part. In the final telemetry packet, Valo's acoustic sensors recorded 6 low-frequency pulses, rhythmic, deliberate, then silence. Then Valo shut itself off. Now, AUVs don't self-destruct, but they can enter hard quiet mode, a rare last-ditch protocol designed to go fully dark to avoid detection. usually reserved for nuclear subs or large marine predators. Valo triggered it on its own. Why? Because it had logged two conditions: something moving faster than 3 knots within 50 meters, detection of non-random acoustic patterns that matched intelligent origin. Valo was 90% confident that what it detected was aware of it. That's not passive ocean life. That's interaction. Some say the drone simply overreacted. Others point to folklore. The Azores have long been rumored to hide echoes of Atlantis' underwater cities, ringing bells glimpses of structure beneath coral. But there's something else. In 2003, a Portuguese Navy sonar sweep picked up tall vertical echoes in the same zone. In 2011, a private company mapped the same trench and found a symmetrical mound spiraled, nearly 60 meters wide. All forgotten, all dismissed, until Iris 15 vanished. There's one last fragment, a handwritten note added to the mission report by the project lead. Scribbled in the margin beside the acoustic readout, it reads, "We should not return, and no one has. Sector AB02 remains untouched. No new drones, no expeditions, no follow-ups, just coordinates on a map, a missing drone, a blurred image, and the last words it ever sent. Approaching structure, movement detected, not alone." Now, you drift farther into the Pacific, farther than ships dare go, past the last island, past the last signal, to a place so isolated that the nearest human being might be floating above you on the International Space Station. This is Point Nemo, Latin for no one. It's the oceanic pole of inaccessibility, a cold, empty patch of water more than 1,400 nautical miles from any coast. There's no land, no planes overhead, no sonar buoys, just endless rolling silence. So of course that's where something answers. In the late summer of 2010, the USS Anchorage, a Virginia-class fast-attack submarine, was gliding beneath the surface hundreds of miles north of Point Nemo. Officially, they were running passive sonar tests. Unofficially, they were listening. The area was perfect for it. No civilian shipping lanes, no marine traffic. The only noise in the water came from distant tectonic rumbles and the slow churn of the sea. The Anchorage powered down its engines and drifted silent as a ghost. They were over 1,500 feet below the surface. Nothing around them. Just pressure steel and the long ache of distance. And then the sonar operator mid-shift, probably bored, probably fighting, sleep, flinched. There was a ping, not from them, not from any known source. It came from beneath, deeper than the trench they were mapping, deeper than the lowest part of the Mariana Trench. The contact registered at 11,300 meters, that's over 37,000 feet. If the reading was accurate, it came from a depth that shouldn't even exist in that region. At first, the crew assumed it was a sonar ghost, a false return caused by thermal layering or underwater ridges. These things happen. But then the ping came again. Same tone, same source. But now, it was moving, slowly, deliberately, rising. The Anchorage adjusted course slightly to focus their listening array. Their systems recalibrated, and then there it was again. The contact was huge, at least 200 meters wide, based on the sonar return. That's longer than most warships. Too big to be a submarine, too large and too smooth to be a whale. And the return wasn't chaotic or blurry, it was symmetrical. It didn't move like a creature. It moved like an object with purpose. Over the next 17 minutes, the thing rose 200 meters, then paused, then rose again. All the while, sonar painted it as a kind of geometric mass. No scattered echoes, no flaring distortion, just clean, consistent shape. Flat surfaces, parallel angles, like a ship, but deeper than ships go. And built in a way no ship should be. The onboard AI flagged it as an acoustic unknown. That's not a label you want to see. It means the object didn't match anything in the Navy's extensive library of sonar profiles, biological, mechanical, or natural. Back at headquarters, these anomalies are sometimes humorously nicknamed the deep answer, because that's what they feel like, not a call, but a response. And the strange part? This contact came just 3 months after the launch of NOAA's new generation of deep-sea monitoring satellites. The ones that scan the ocean not for fishing boats or storms, but for temperature anomalies and vibrations across the seafloor. It's as if something had been listening and then replied. The anchorage reported the event and then left the area. Quietly. They didn't chase it. They didn't ping it. They did what trained officers do when something doesn't fit the manual they logged it, then got out. 6 months later, a second sub, the USS Monitor, was sent under a classified mission called Operation Hadros. This time, they brought high-resolution sonar gear, capable of mapping trenches with insane detail. They spent 2 weeks circling the coordinates. What they found wasn't the object. It was a hole, a perfectly circular depression, nearly 5 miles wide, right in the middle of the seafloor, ringed by an unnatural slope, too smooth, too sudden, like a crater without an impact, and at the center, a null zone. Sonar just stopped. You see, even soft sand reflects a little sound. But here the ping went out and never came back. It was like the ocean floor had swallowed the signal whole. It was a void. They mapped it, marked it as a geological hollow, then left. The reports were sealed. The operation was terminated. No public missions returned to the site. But whispers leaked. Whispers of a theory that the object seen by the anchorage hadn't come from nowhere. It had emerged from that crater. That the depression wasn't a geological feature. It was a door. Skeptics called it nonsense. They said sonar glitches, magnetic fields, thermal layers. These things explain everything. But even they couldn't explain why the same signal repeated 72 hours later. Yes, it happened again. 3 days after the anchorage recorded the first contact, their sonar picked up a second ping. Same pattern, slightly higher frequency, then silence. Like a ripple. Like something had tested the water, then slipped back beneath it. There was no third ping, just quiet. Today, Point Nemo remains as silent as ever. A place where space agencies intentionally crash old satellites. A place considered so lifeless that no one watches it too closely anymore, but some do. Some researchers still scan the sonar data from that day. They've found faint harmonics overtones in the return signal, like music played on a string the size of a football field. One called it structural, not biological. Another said it resembled the vibration you'd expect from a gravitational shift, as if the mass of something had changed without moving. And one last odd detail, the shape, the massive contact. It wasn't blurry. It wasn't shifting like a whale or a pod of fish. It was consistent. Some said it looked like architecture. Others said it felt more like a shell, empty, waiting. So what moved beneath Point Nemo? A sunken structure, a lost leviathan, or something else. Something that sleeps not in caves, but in trenches. That doesn't blink or breathe, but listens, and maybe was never meant to wake up. Because here's the thing, if you listen long enough to the silence beneath the sea, it starts to sound like a pattern. And sometimes, if you're very, very unlucky, it listens back. Now, the cold black of the Pacific fades, and you find yourself somewhere brighter, warmer, shallower. But don't get comfortable, because even in a sea famous for sun-drenched islands and cruise ships full of bad Wi-Fi and overpriced cocktails, something old still hums beneath the surface. Welcome to the Ionian Sea. It sits between Italy and Greece, ringed by history temples. God's ruins war. But we're not here for myth. We're here for something real. A sound, low, steady, unchanging. A sound that shouldn't be there. That doesn't move, doesn't drift, doesn't fade. It just stays. This is the Ionian pulse, and no one knows where it comes from. It began, at least officially, in 2004, during a NATO mapping project. A pair of survey submarines had been deployed off the coast of southern Italy near the Calabrian Arc. Their job, chart the seabed, update the bathymetric maps, find out where it's safe to drill dive or park a warship. They were scientific, precise, and boring, until about 12 hours in, when the instruments started acting wrong. First came the depth warning. One of the subs registered an abrupt vertical shift as if it had suddenly surfaced, but it hadn't. It was still 3,000 feet down. Then came the compass. It started spinning, not wildly, not broken, just slow, deliberate turns, tick, 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 as if something was tracking. Then the sound, not a ping, not a thud, not even a wail, a pulse, low, constant, electronic, not varying, not fading, not shifting, just there. The hydrophones on both vessels recorded it clearly. A long, smooth tone that sat around 1396 hertz, almost beneath the threshold of human hearing. Not seismic, not marine life, and not mechanical. The pulse didn't stop. Not after they moved. Not after they surfaced. Not after they shut down systems. That might have been the end of it. Just another blip in the ocean's endless weirdness. But then someone looked back through the logs, and they found it again, dozens of times. From 1997 to 2004, different ships, different surveys, same exact pulse, same tone, same location, always between 2,800 and 3,400 feet. And here's the part that makes oceanographers go pale. The frequency, 13.96. Hertz hadn't drifted by more than 0.02 hertz in over 7 years. That doesn't happen. Even whales, the most precise biological sound makers in the ocean, vary their calls slightly over time. Water temperature, pressure, salinity, those things affect sound, but not this. This signal wasn't adapting. It was repeating, deliberately. They called it the Ionian pulse, and they still haven't stopped hearing it. In 2006, a French-operated submersible, the Minerve de Sceaux, passed through the same corridor and experienced what the crew described as a blackout of orientation. Not a power cut, not a malfunction, just disorientation. For 5 minutes, it was like the sub didn't know where it was. Inertial systems froze. Positional data looped. The instruments didn't go dark. They went blank. Then it all came back. In 2009, it happened again. Another dive. Another disorientation event. And then again in 2012. Always in the same corridor. Always at depth. Always while the Ionian pulse was humming. By 2020, over 22 submarines, military and civilian, had reported at least some form of interference while passing through the area. So, of course, the theories started piling up. Theory 1, geological resonance. Maybe the seabed is shaped in just the right way to reflect and amplify a natural sound. Think of it like an underwater pipe organ. Some even speculated the trench acted like a sound chamber, turning weak seismic vibrations into a standing wave. Except natural resonance isn't that stable. The ocean changes, currents shift, sediment settles, yet the pulse remained the same. Theory 2, man-made beacon. Maybe it was an old Cold War sonar array, something left behind and forgotten. That would explain the frequency, the power, the precision. But Cold War systems like SOSUS don't operate at that frequency. And more importantly, they're placed in the Atlantic, not the Ionian. No known nation has a deep-sea transmitter in that corridor. And even if they did something, would need to power it continuously for decades without anyone noticing. Theory 3, deep sea venting. Some suggested it could be caused by gas vents or methane seeps bubbles escaping the crust at a steady rate. Problem: methane releases are chaotic. They spike sputter scatter. They don't produce a steady tone at 13.96 Hz for 20 plus years. So we dig deeper, and we find something else. In 2014, a marine research team noticed something odd about the pulse. It wasn't alone. Hidden in the waveform were faint harmonic secondary tones embedded within the main signal. They weren't random. They rose and fell, like patterns, like a message. That's when one researcher posed a radical question. What if this is sonar? Not from us, but from something else. And before you laugh, consider this. Whales echolocate. Dolphins ping each other with complex clicks. Sound is how deep-sea creatures see in the dark. What if something older is doing the same? Not just shouting into the void, but listening, scanning, waiting. Then came 2017. A Norwegian submarine, part of a joint EU survey, dove into the trench. It was meant to collect sediment samples and test an updated sonar suite. The dive went smoothly until 3,100 feet. That's when the sonar glitched, not failed. Just returned something it shouldn't have. A structure, tall, vertical, smooth, at least 30 meters high. Then it vanished. The sea returned to normal. The sonar cleared, but for 4 minutes during that anomaly, the Ionian pulse changed. It rose to 14 tone. It's in my Iberian Q. Hertz then slowly dropped back down, as if it had noticed something, as if it had adjusted. That was the last straw. In 2019, NATO quietly discontinued mapping in the region. No press release, no statement, just silence. Today, the Ionian pulse still hums, still at 1396 Hz, still deep, still constant. Submarines avoid the corridor now, at least officially. But those who've passed through it describe the feeling the same way. Weight, not pressure, not fear, just a presence, as if something knows you're there, as if the water itself is holding its breath, as if somewhere in the dark, just past your sonar range, something is listening, still. And when you pass too close, maybe it listens a little harder. Maybe it shifts just slightly. Maybe it doesn't like to be watched. Because sometimes in the deep, the most terrifying thing isn't a shape or a sound. It's a rhythm. And this one hasn't missed a beat. Now we sink farther still, away from the warm, myth-stained waters of the Ionian Sea. We turn east, then drop sharply downward into the Black Pit, off the edge of the Pacific Plate. Here, near the far reaches of New Zealand's ocean territory, lies a wound in the Earth's crust. It doesn't have a famous name. No shipwrecks, no legends, just a series of numbers on a map and a quiet warning written in a research file. This area is not suitable for long-duration autonomous exploration. This is the edge of the Kermadec Trench, and it's where Sea Drone 37 vanished. Not crashed, not destroyed, just gone. And then 9 days later, it came back, briefly, before it disappeared again. The mission was routine, a civilian project, a collaboration between oceanographic institutions in Wellington, Auckland, and a few Pacific Rim research agencies. Their goal mapped biodiversity in extreme pressure zones. Look for new life. Listen for acoustic events, the usual science data samples, charts funding. Sea Drone 37 wasn't flashy. It was about the size of a kayak. Matte black hull. Designed to dive to 9,000 meters. Sleek and low profile. Like a sea creature that doesn't want to be noticed. It launched at sunrise on May 14, 2019, from the research vessel Kawaka Horizon. Weather was calm. No anomalies. The drone slipped into the ocean and began its descent. At 6,180 meters, it passed over a slope leading into the Hadal zone, and then 9:34 a.m. signal lost. No warning, no power surge, no mechanical degradation, just blink, gone. The researchers assumed the worst. A hull breach, a trench wall collapse. Maybe it hit a pocket of supercooled brine and froze internally. But none of that made sense, because Sea Drone 37 had multiple failsafes. If it lost navigation, it was programmed to float. If it suffered damage, it released a locator buoy. If it lost contact, it initiated a soft surface mode, a slow rise followed by a low-power signal burst. But there was no signal, no drift pattern, no buoy, no ping. The ocean was silent. For 9 days, the team circled the area. They deployed towed sonar, launched backup drones. They scoured every inch of the descent path. But it was like the drone had been erased. Then came the handshake, May 23, 7:02 a.m. A satellite receiver in Tonga picked up a faint burst, 90 seconds long, containing one small packet of data, GPS coordinates. Sea Drone 37 had resurfaced, briefly, more than 2,300 meters away from its original descent location. No current could have carried it that far. Not that fast. Not against the flow of the South Pacific gyre. The team scrambled to intercept, but by the time they reached the coordinates, gone again. No wreckage, no buoy, just an empty patch of sea. But the data packet was real. Inside, a single still image time-stamped 3 days after the drone vanished. It showed the ocean floor, barely visible in the drone's low-light floodlight, but enough to make out detail. The terrain was wrong, not smooth, not scattered. It looked like fabric, rippling, with regular protrusions, small ridges, sharp angles, too symmetrical to be coral or rock, and near the edge of the frame, a shape, not a creature, not a wreck, just a curve, smooth, unbroken, reflective, like something had turned toward the drone, then moved. You could almost imagine an eye. The data log showed that just before this image was taken, Sea Drone 37 had experienced a drop in ambient ocean noise. That's not unusual. The ocean gets quiet sometimes, but this wasn't normal silence. This was complete null. No tectonic murmurs, no marine clicks, not even the faint fizz of suspended silt. It was like someone had pressed mute on the entire trench. 3 seconds later, the drone's magnetometer spiked. Then, the drone pivoted abruptly without using thrusters. It turned. Then data ends. No crash, no power surge, no breach alert, just silence. Later fragments of Sea Drone 37's outer casing were recovered by a Japanese research team 6 months later, over 600 kilometers away. One panel was crushed inward, but not like a pressure failure, not an implosion. It looked like it had been squeezed, then released. Somehow, the compression didn't crack the composite. It warped it, stretched it, as if pressure had been applied unevenly, then stopped. And on the interior, fine scratches. Not natural abrasions, not from sand or rock, parallel lines. Dozens of them, like something had moved across the inside surface, repeatedly, gently, as if inspecting or recording. Theories emerged, of course. Theory 1, tectonic slippage. A section of the trench wall collapsed, dragging the drone down and spitting it out elsewhere. But there was no seismic activity. Theory 2, brine pool. The drone fell into a hypersaline lake, a dense underwater basin that blocked signals. Maybe it resurfaced accidentally, except no such pool has ever been documented in this region. And again, no debris. Theory 3, electromagnetic event. A natural magnetic anomaly that erased the drone's instruments and redirected it. But magnetic mapping of the area shows no such signature, and even a strong EM pulse wouldn't make the drone physically relocate. Then there's Theory 4, the one nobody wants to say out loud, that the drone didn't just disappear, it was taken, and then for a moment returned, just long enough to remind us, to send one picture, and then vanish again. Inside the metadata, researchers found something else, a tiny sound file, corrupted, only a few seconds long, but in it a tone, not mechanical, not random. 5 pulses, increasing in pitch. Then silence. It didn't match any known glitch or acoustic signal, but it echoed another recording made 20 years earlier. Another drone, another trench, another disappearance. So maybe it's just coincidence, or maybe there's a pattern, a shape beneath the sea. One that doesn't want to be mapped, that doesn't sink or float, but waits. And when we send machines to find it, sometimes they don't come back, or worse, they come back changed. So what did Sea Drone 37 see? What saw it? And what still waits in that black space, watching with a silence so deep, it mutes the very sea around it. 9 days, 1 photo, no explanation. You're farther from shore now, but the water is warmer. A deep cobalt blue turning turquoise near the surface with sunlight that flickers through for longer than it should. You're off the northeast coast of Australia in the Coral Sea, a region known more for reefs and dive resorts than deep mysteries. The sea here is scattered with islands and sandbars, and beneath it all, the largest coral structure in the world. But the Coral Sea isn't all paradise and postcards. Beneath those reefs lie canyons, drop-offs, trenches, and wrecks. Dozens of them, most from World War II. Bombers, destroyers, submarines, some marked on maps, some remembered with wreaths and naval plaques. But one wreck doesn't have a name, or a country, or a date. Divers just call it the Deepwater Dagger. And the more they study it, the more it refuses to make sense. The first sighting came in 2011. A group of technical divers from Queensland were testing a new breathing mixture for deep descents, helium-rich high stability, rated for depths most recreational divers never reach. Their plan: locate a reef wall east of Holmes Reef, chart it, tag it, brag about it later over beers. Instead, one of the divers saw a line in the silt. It wasn't coral. It wasn't a ridge. It was metal, smooth, sharp-edged, cold to the touch even through gloves. He followed it, brushing aside sea fans and silt. The line curved slightly, then vanished into growth. They were only down for minutes, no time to explore. But they surfaced shaken. Not scared, just confused. They'd seen submarine wrecks before. This wasn't one. There were no visible hatches, no rust, no barnacles, just a long, unnatural hull half buried under coral and silence. They kept the coordinates secret. In this kind of diving, a good wreck is like buried treasure. You don't share it until you know what you've found. They came back a year later, better prepared, more lights, more air. A tethered ROV, small, maneuverable, high-resolution camera. This time they saw more. A vessel nearly 70 meters long, mostly buried. But the visible sections were strange. There were no conning towers, no propellers, no visible damage. The rear fins were shaped like a diving bell, not functional for propulsion, just decorative, smooth, like a whale's fluke frozen in place. And near the front, a single protrusion, a blade, not sharp, not separate. It was part of the hull fused to the bow, angled forward, like a dagger, hence the name. The sonar imaging showed something even stranger. The hull wasn't riveted or welded. There were no seams, no repair scars, no external features. It looked grown, not built. Then they found the entry point, not a hatch. A circular port too small for a torpedo, too high to be a ballast vent. Covered in coral, but sealed tight. They didn't force it. Not yet. By 2014, word had started to leak. The diving community is small, and a discovery this strange doesn't stay quiet forever. A team from the University of New South Wales got involved. They brought sonar submersibles funding, made it official. What they found inside the wreck changed everything. The submersible reached through a damaged panel near the midsection. Coral had cracked part of the hull open, exposing what lay within. And what lay within wasn't war. It was technology, but not ours, not clearly. The equipment inside was unlike any naval layout. No levers, no screens, no knobs. Just flat black panels with faint outlines of glyphs. Not words, not numbers, just shapes, curves, loops, broken circles. Some pulsed faintly when touched by the probe. There were seats, but they weren't seats. Molded hollows, smaller than a human body, sloped backward, angled strangely, like something with different posture had once sat here facing the controls. No straps, no padding, just concave impressions built right into the floor. The lights still worked, not bright, not flickering, just faintly glowing beneath layers of coral dust. They had no power source, no reactor, no batteries. They just still glowed. And the symbols, no language matched them. Not Cyrillic, not Latin, not Chinese. Linguists ran comparisons against every known writing system. Linear A Sumerian Indus script. No match, but the pattern showed syntax, repetition, rhythm. It wasn't art, it was language. The divers tried mapping it, photographing, scanning, but nothing came back clear. And when they checked the metal samples, the alloy was unclassified. Titanium traces, yes, but laced with carbon structures that shouldn't exist at that depth. No corrosion, no heat damage, no aging, like it had only just arrived. Then came the dagger, that blade at the front of the ship scanned by sonar. It absorbed most of the signal. The return was strange, fuzzy, as if it were hollow but full of something else. Divers who touched it described a strange feeling. Not vibration, not pain, just pressure. Like holding a tuning fork. Like standing next to a bass speaker with no sound. One diver said it felt like the dagger was listening. Then the university paused the project. Officially, funding cuts. Equipment maintenance. Unofficially, they were told to stop. Someone stepped in. No press, no cameras, no grants, no follow-up. The site was erased from expedition maps, but the divers kept diving, quietly, in small groups, off the books. They mapped more of the interior, found no bodies, no clothing, no gear, just those seats and those panels. One diver claims the lights got brighter as they got deeper into the wreck. That's never been confirmed. But the fear in his voice when he said it, that was real. So what is the deep water dagger? A Cold War prototype? Unlikely. There's no propulsion system, no human engineering traits, and it's too advanced. Alien, maybe, but not alien in the way people think. It's not futuristic. It's familiar. Just wrong. Like a machine made by something that watched humans from far away and tried to build one of our ships without fully understanding us. Some researchers believe it's reverse engineered, built from something we found and then abandoned unfinished. Others think it's older, much older, a relic. From what? From before. Whatever it is, it's still there, still humming, still waiting. And no country has claimed it, not even to deny it. Because maybe it's not a wreck. Maybe it's not even a ship. Maybe it's a message. And maybe just, maybe, we were never supposed to find it. We drift now across the Pacific again, past the trenches, past the ghost currents, to somewhere quiet, too quiet. This is the middle of nowhere, a featureless stretch of ocean halfway between continents. Nothing grows here. Nothing lives here in large numbers. No whales pass, no sonar stations, no shipping lanes, just water. And in 2012, this nothing started to whisper. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, it was just strange. It didn't start with a bang or even a sonar ping. It started with a low, rippling tremor that slipped through hydrophones like the tail end of a breath. Barely audible, almost accidental, but it wasn't, because it came back exactly every 13 hours, the same sequence, the same distorted rhythm, a garbled series of sounds like human speech, but twisted, slowed, and reversed. It became known as the Botus Echo, and if that name sounds like it came from space, you're not wrong. Let's rewind. A group of ocean acoustic researchers were analyzing ambient hydrophone data from a patch of the Central Pacific off the coast of nothing near the Clarion-Clipperton Fracture Zone. Their job was dull. Chart background ocean noise, monitor biological calls, catalog anomalies. Just enough to keep someone from falling asleep at the console. And then it played. The signal was quiet, not mechanical, not biological. It started with a slow, upward tone, followed by something stranger. Not quite speech, but not random. Reversed phonemes clipped fragments of syllables like a human voice processed backwards through water and time. The entire loop lasted 2 minutes and 17 seconds, then silence, until 13 hours later, when it repeated perfectly. That's when they knew it wasn't natural, because nothing in the ocean repeats with that kind of precision. Not whales, not quakes, not tides. And when they ran the signal through audio processing software, it didn't get clearer, it got creepier. Because when reversed and pitch shifted, it resembled human language patterns. Not words, not grammar. Just the rhythm of a sentence, like someone speaking in a dream. Only wrong, backwards, too deep, too slow. It was like a child mimicking a voice they'd only heard once far away. They triangulated the source as best they could. It was fuzzy, spread wide, but the signal strength was strongest near a region known by astronomers as the Botus Void, a place in the sky where almost nothing exists. A cosmic hole, no galaxies, no stars. And while it was just a coincidence, an astronomer on the research team whispered the nickname Buddha's Echo, and it stuck. Because that's what it felt like. Not a signal, but an answer. A reply from something old, slow, and just a little too late. Then came the harmonics. When researchers pulled apart the signal, they found overtones, secondary frequencies, buried inside the main pulse. These weren't random. They rose and fell like breath. Some suggested it wasn't one sound, it was two. A call and response, a dialogue, or a rehearsal. Like something was practicing a language it didn't quite understand. For weeks, the signal repeated every 13 hours. Then on October 19th, it didn't. The 13-hour mark passed. Nothing. Until exactly 14 hours later, when it came back. But this time, it had changed. It wasn't reversed anymore. It was playing forward, still garbled, still distorted, but clearer, as if the speaker had learned something. Then after 2 weeks of clearer transmissions, it stopped completely and never returned. But during those 2 weeks, 3 things happened. First, an acoustic monitoring platform was damaged off the coast of Samoa. Its titanium sensor cage was crushed, not imploded. Crushed, as if something gripped it. Second, a passive sonar array in the Philippines picked up 12 pulses, increasing in pitch, evenly spaced, like a code. Each one 11 seconds apart. Then silence. Finally, a deep-sea drone recorded a null zone, an area where no sound existed. Not quiet, not muffled, just blank. As if sound refused to exist there. These incidents were never linked publicly. But internally, one phrase appeared in the metadata logs of all 3 events. Preceding event Botus, theories erupted. Theory 1, a natural resonance. The ocean is full of sound tunnels and pressure gradients. Maybe a fault line opened up a perfect acoustic loop formed by chance, except chance doesn't update its message or get clearer. Theory 2, a rogue broadcast. Maybe a lost transmitter or an old Cold War installation was glitching. Maybe it picked up a fragment of a human voice and just looped it. Except no broadcast station has ever operated at that frequency. And what powered it, and how did it stop? Theory 3, a misinterpreted animal call. An unknown species experimenting with low-frequency mimicry. But the signal wasn't marine. It didn't propagate like whale song. It was focused, intentional. So then came Theory 4, the one no one wanted to type out loud, that it was practicing. That something beneath the ocean had been listening to us for a very long time and decided just once to try speaking back. Only it didn't know how. It mimicked, reversed, paused, listened, then tried again, clearer, until it got it right. And then it stopped. Because maybe it wasn't trying to talk to us at all. Maybe it was sending a message across the deep, not vertically, but horizontally, across pressure zones, through old trenches, between watchers. And we just overheard it, like standing in the hall and hearing a conversation in a language you shouldn't understand, but suddenly do. There are no new recordings of the Botus Echo. At least none that have been made public. But there are whispers that the signal hasn't stopped, it's just moved, that it's bounced into a new trench, or found a better way to hide, or maybe it was never meant to stay, just pass through. A traveling signal, a wake-up call to something else. So what was the Botus Echo? A sonar artifact, a forgotten transmission, or a first attempt, because the most haunting part of it isn't the sound. It's that after 2 weeks of trying, it got clearer, it learned, and then it went quiet. And in the ocean, nothing goes quiet without a reason. Let's go colder. Colder than the Ionian. Colder than the Coral Sea. Colder than you'd think anything could be, and still move. You're drifting now into the northern reaches of the Sea of Okhotsk, a pocket of the North Pacific, cupped between the jagged coastline of eastern Russia and the sprawling, forest-choked island of Sakhalin. The water here is black, icy. Half the year, it's frozen solid with sea ice, the kind that creaks like old wood and swallows ships whole. And underneath that ice, silence. Until one day, in 2015, something burned. Not visibly, not on the surface, but deep beneath the floor of the sea, in a place where no volcano should exist, no hydrothermal vents, no fault lines, just frozen sediment and pressure. A Russian research drone was sent down to scan the seabed. Routine geological survey. They wanted to chart underwater ridges for offshore gas exploration. The drone was unmanned precise, outfitted with thermal scanner sonar and a fiber optic tether connecting it to a surface vessel. Everything was normal until it passed over a 20-meter wide trench, shallow, narrow, and previously unremarkable. Then the temperature reading spiked, suddenly, and without warning, the sensors recorded a sharp localized increase in heat, over 120 degrees Celsius, coming from within the trench. No lava, no bubbling gases, just heat. Perfectly symmetrical. At first they assumed it was a sensor glitch, maybe a reflection, maybe an equipment failure. But then the sonar began to distort. The pulses came back scattered, like they were bouncing off invisible panels inside the trench. Then deeper scans revealed something else. Shapes. Beneath the sediment, buried under meters of cold sludge, were angles, straight lines, junctions, corners. The drone sent back partial images. It wasn't natural rock. It wasn't coral or pipe or wreckage. It looked like a grid, man-made, maybe, but not mapped, not recorded, and not built to be seen. For nearly 2 hours, the drone hovered over the anomaly. It scanned, recorded, measured, and during that time, the surface technician overseeing the feed, Mikhail Astrov, became agitated. At first, he just asked questions. Why was the heat so clean? Why weren't there outgassing spikes? Then he stopped sleeping, wouldn't leave the data terminal, kept scribbling diagrams in the margins of the printouts, concentric circles, numbers that didn't match any coordinate system, short notes like cyclical resonance rising and directional pull increasing. Crew members said he started muttering to himself, not in Russian, in something else, rhythmic syllables, clicking sounds, too regular to be nonsense. They brought in the ship medic, but before they could sedate him, Mikhail said something that froze everyone in the control room. It's not heat, it's a signal. He said he could hear it. Not through the equipment, but in his teeth. Like the sound was vibrating through the ship's hull and into his bones. They pulled the drone back, or what was left of it, because when it breached the surface, the crew went silent. The camera array gone, the sensor suite torn off, the rear ballast system ripped away. But the hull still intact, not crushed, not ruptured, just stripped, like something had reached up and taken what it wanted and left the rest. They checked the tether logs. No tension spike, no collision alert, no signs of drag or entanglement. It was as if the water itself had pulled the components off, deliberately, The drone was stored in quarantine. Mikhail was sedated and flown back to the mainland, and the coordinates of the anomaly redacted. The survey area was officially labeled Unstable Sediment Zone. All future dives were canceled, but the data, it still existed, and the shapes beneath the trench, still unexplained. Later analysis of the thermal signature showed it wasn't dispersing like a natural plume. It was pulsing. Every 6 minutes, the temperature would spike, then cool, then spike again, like something beneath the seabed was breathing or beating. One physicist called it a latent geothermal relay, a system designed not to release heat, but to regulate it, like an artificial pressure valve buried under kilometers of crust. That would suggest architecture. That would suggest something built. And then there's Mikhail. His family says he never recovered. He suffered migraines constantly, wouldn't go near bodies of water, claimed to hear a low hum that rose in pitch whenever he closed his eyes. He stopped speaking entirely 6 months after the mission. And when investigators later checked his field notebook, they found the last page filled with one repeated phrase: not asleep, not machine, not sealed. No punctuation, no context, just those words over and over again. There's a theory, one that's never been published, only whispered, that what they found near Sakhalin wasn't mechanical, it wasn't geothermal, it was biological, that the grid wasn't a structure, it was tissue, a vascular pattern, blood vessel architecture on a scale too large to understand, that the heat pulses weren't system functions, but metabolism, that what they scanned was alive, dormant, buried, and waking. Of course, no one can prove that, because no one went back. The mission was buried, the data restricted, but the anomaly still there, still pulsing, still sending heat in rhythms that don't match anything else on Earth. And every so often, a sonar buoy in the Sea of Okhotsk will register a null zone, a pocket of dead sound, where pressure feels off even when nothing moves, as if something below is shifting, as if the seabed isn't just sediment, but skin, and something miles beneath is listening through it, just waiting for another drone, another sonar ping, another knock on the door. Because the ocean doesn't always drown its secrets. Sometimes it hides them, deep, warm, and dreaming. We're back in the Mediterranean now, this time near Sicily. Warm, shallow waters, familiar coasts, ferries and fishing boats, tourists sipping wine on sun-bleached terraces while cargo ships slip quietly between Italy and North Africa. But beneath that calm, the seafloor isn't calm at all. Beneath the waves lies the Sicily-Malta escarpment, a jagged cliff that drops straight into darkness. It's not the deepest trench in the world, but it's ancient faulted and laced with scars from tectonic battles stretching back millions of years. And it's here in April of 2003 that an Italian submarine was pushed, not hit, not rammed, pushed by something no one could see. This is the story of the Himera Ridge displacement. The sub was the Salvatore Totoro, a brand new diesel-electric attack submarine still shiny with paint and pride, on its 7th test mission. Quiet, low speed, no weapons loaded, just a systems check. It was descending into a narrow fold west of Himera Ridge to run a routine, buoyant glide, a maneuver where the sub kills propulsion and lets itself drift downward silently for data collection. Engines off, crew alert, water calm. Everything went according to plan until 12:03 p.m. That's when the control room heard a soft, almost apologetic thud, and the entire submarine tilted, not up, not down, sideways. A subtle 3-degree lean, barely enough to notice in a hallway, but in a submarine, it felt like the ship was being nudged, not by current, not by impact, just gently moved. They thought it was ballast imbalance, a tank misfire. They corrected it. The tilt stabilized. Then 3 minutes later, it happened again, but harder. No collision, no turbulence, just a firm sideways shift. No water drag, no echo, no wake, as if the sea itself had changed shape. One of the sonar officers described it later as sliding inside a dream. Like the submarine didn't move, but reality did. Then came the alarm, a pressure alert from compartment 3, midsection, port side. The hull was buckling just slightly, not enough to breach, just dented. The crew ran full diagnostics. No nearby vessels, no rock wall, no cavitation. The water had been perfectly still. And yet there was now a 2-meter-long dent in the outer hull. Not jagged, not sharp, just a smooth inward curve, as if something massive and soft had leaned against the steel for a moment and then let go. They surfaced, slowly. The rest of the mission was canceled. The damage was examined, and that's when the questions started. Because the dent didn't match anything. Not a mine, not a net, not a whale. And the sonar showed nothing, absolutely nothing. No moving shapes, no vibrations, no acoustic trail, just silence. The engineers said the deformation would have taken a force equivalent to 40,000 kilograms applied laterally. That's like being sideswiped by a freight train made of water, except there was no current. The Mediterranean is full of minor seismic quirks, sure, but the seismic monitors didn't register anything that day. No tremor, no slippage, not even a microquake. Theory 1, submarine slump. Maybe a deep-sea sediment slide sent a slow-moving pressure wave sideways through the water column. Problem: no sediment plume was recorded. No floor deformation was seen on sonar. And such slides usually create vertical motion, not lateral. Theory 2, internal wave. Oceanographers know about internal waves, massive underwater currents that travel between layers of different temperature or salinity. These can reach hundreds of feet in height and carry immense force. But internal waves create buoyant drag, not horizontal shove. They also leave clear thermocline shifts. And the Totoro recorded no temperature anomaly, no salinity jump, no thermal front. Theory 3, magnetic distortion. Some parts of the Mediterranean show slight magnetic variations. Ancient rock, subterranean faults. Could a magnetic pulse have interfered with the sub's inertial systems? Sure, maybe, but that doesn't explain a physical dent in the hull, or how a magnetic pulse could cause a ship to move without engines. Then there's theory 4, the quiet theory, that something touched it. No one says it aloud in the official reports, but one margin note from a hull technician reads, compression suggests a biological force. Unlikely. But pressure distribution is curved, not point-loaded. In other words, not a weapon, not a rock. Something with shape, something that moved past the Todaro like a whale only. Too wide, too still, too silent. It wasn't the first time. In 1998, a Greek research drone reported an uncommanded 6-meter drift near the Hellenic Trench. Instruments logged lateral motion without propulsion. The drone's outer panel was scratched deep parallel lines too smooth to be coral. In 2011, a French Navy sub aborted a dive in the Tyrrhenian Sea after a sudden sideways shift cracked one of its stabilizer fins. In both cases, the water was still, the sonar clean, and now it had happened again. But this time with a scar left behind, the Todaro's damage was classified. The crew debriefed. The site marked acoustically unstable. But among certain circles, naval analysts, oceanic engineers, this event is still discussed. Not officially, just over drinks. At conferences, in hallway conversations that start with, "Have you ever seen?" There's a phrase they use, silent displacement. It means something large passed by, something that didn't make a sound, something that didn't disturb the sea, and yet moved through it anyway. Some believe it was a pocket of distorted physics, like gravity had folded sideways just for a second. Others think it was alive, something that doesn't hunt, doesn't attack, just travels quietly. And if you happen to cross its path, the best you can hope for is a dent. The Todaro was repaired, painted over, sent back to sea. But that hull panel, still stored in a secure naval archive, still measuring a smooth, perfect inward curve, as if the ocean once pressed its finger there, just to remind us it still can. You're not dreaming, but it feels like you are now. You're somewhere in the North Atlantic. No specific country claims this stretch of sea. It's a patch of cold, open ocean, scattered with currents and distant icebergs. The kind of place where nothing much happens until it does. And this time, something came back when it shouldn't have. This is the story of Vortex 9, a British submersible that resurfaced perfectly intact without its crew. It didn't sink. It didn't crash. It just reappeared, empty. Let's go back. In 2007, the Royal Navy had begun testing a new class of manned submersibles for ultra-deep surveying missions. The Vortex program was designed to handle extreme pressure, long-duration dives, and minimal acoustic signature. Vortex 9 was one of the final prototypes, smaller than a traditional submarine, but large enough to carry 3 crew members in a pressurized cockpit. The mission was straightforward. Test navigation, stress test the hull at 4,000 meters, collect some data, and come home. Launched from a support ship off the coast of Greenland, the descent was smooth. Clear weather, steady current, no seismic activity. Telemetry showed all systems nominal. Vortex 9 reported its final check-in at 03:47 a.m., just after beginning its final lateral glide along the seafloor. Then silence. No emergency signal. No distress beacon. Just absence. The support ship tried to hail the sub. Nothing. They initiated recovery protocols and launched an ROV to search the descent path. It took over 14 hours to locate the sub. When they finally did, Vortex 9 was already on the surface, drifting, completely intact. No breaches, no damage, not even a scratch. And inside, no crew. The cockpit was sealed. The oxygen supply was full. The emergency rations unopened. The life support system still running. And the hatch, never opened. No sign of decompression. No escape attempt. No distress logs. Nothing. Just an empty sub, waiting. The most unnerving part, the interior was spotless. No signs of struggle. No blood. No damage to the seats or harnesses. The crew's personal items were still in place. Wristwatches, notebooks, a thermos of tea, still half full and warm. But the seats were empty. And then they found the photo. The internal camera system had taken a series of routine time-lapse photos throughout the mission, part of an onboard log that clicked every 10 minutes. And at 04:09 a.m., the final image was recorded. It showed all 3 crew members seated inside, looking forward, as if something outside the sub had caught their attention. Their faces weren't fearful, just focused, alert. And then, the next image, nothing. The system stopped recording, not shut down, just stopped. No error, no corruption. As if the camera simply no longer had anything to capture. Investigators examined every inch of the sub. No air leaks, no radiation, no biological trace of the crew. DNA scans came back clean. Even the cockpit's pressure seals were untouched, meaning they didn't leave. They were removed, somehow, quietly, without breaking anything. Naval engineers were stunned. One whispered, "This isn't a failure, this is a subtraction." So the theories began. Theory 1, catastrophic decompression. But the hull showed no sign of rupture. And that kind of event leaves a mess. Blood mist, torn straps, cracked glass. There was none of that. Theory 2, equipment malfunction. Could the life support system have introduced a hallucinogen? Maybe the crew left via delusion, exited somehow, drifted into the deep, but the hatch was locked from the inside with no override used. And even if they'd somehow opened it, there'd be evidence. Suits missing, disturbed gear. Everything was exactly where it should be, except them. Theory 3, time displacement. Some fringe physicists pointed to bizarre chronometric anomalies recorded near the same region by other subs clocks that ran slightly faster or slower than expected. Could Vortex 9 have experienced a time slippage, a kind of localized temporal event? That doesn't explain the missing bodies. And then came Theory 4, the one whispered, not written, that something was outside, that the final Photo 3 crew members staring at something unseen wasn't just a coincidence, that something massive, silent, and completely invisible had come close enough to be felt, or heard, or something else. The only physical anomaly on the sub, a thin residue on the exterior hull, not oil, not biological, not salt, somewhere between organic mucus and a metallic film. When exposed to UV light, it pulsed faintly, not fluoresced, pulsed, as if responding. Tests showed no known chemical match, and it was completely inert. But the camera lens on the starboard side, warped, not cracked, warped, melted slightly inward, as if heat or pressure had distorted it in a slow, methodical way. Then there's the radio, the backup distress channel. It had been recording constantly, even when not transmitting. And at 03:59 a.m., it picked up a sound, 1 second long, a single tap, then silence. Not static, not a pop. Just one low-frequency knock like a hand brushing the hull. And then the crew was gone. To this day, no trace of them has been found. No bodies, no suits, no pings from emergency beacons. They simply vanished mid-dive with no cause, no record, no sound. Historians still debate whether it was a tragic malfunction or the first recorded encounter with something truly unseen. Because the sea doesn't like to be watched, and sometimes it doesn't like to be shared. There's one final note in the mission log, scrawled in pen by the second-in-command an hour before they descended, written casually beside a joke about bad coffee. It reads, "Feels like something is already down there, just waiting." And maybe it was. Maybe it still is. And maybe somewhere, off the coast of nowhere, a sub sits perfectly still beneath the water, with 3 empty seats and 1 blurred photo. Staring out into the dark, you're descending again, but slower now. Not on a warship or a scientific drone. Not in a fast-moving sub with radar and torpedoes and emergency fail-safes. No, this time, you're inside Echo 7, a delicate, unarmed, low-noise, listening vessel designed for one thing to hear what the ocean doesn't want you to hear. It's not shaped like a submarine. It looks more like a pill, maybe a gliding light bulb with fins. Echo 7 was designed in 2018 by an acoustic research division in Belgium, with NATO funding behind the curtain. Its purpose: drift silently into deep-water sound corridors and record everything: tectonic rumbles, whale migrations, sub-movements, all without ever pinging the world around it, a floating microphone listening in a language no one else speaks. And on August 17th, 2021, it went into the Iberian abyssal plain off the coast of Portugal, a quiet, featureless trench with barely any recorded anomalies. Nothing of note, really, until Echo 7 started tapping. Or rather, it heard something that was tapping, and then so did the crew. Echo 7 launched at 4:52 a.m. Weather clear, seas calm. The plan: descend to 4,200 meters, engage passive acoustic sensors, and let it glide for 36 hours before retrieval. It never made it back, but the recordings did, and what they captured still doesn't have a name. At 1,900 meters, the acoustic array detected a faint rhythmic tap, not seismic, not mechanical, just a simple repeating knock. Every 7 seconds, it sounded close. But when the sonar array attempted to triangulate, the return came from multiple directions: above, below, beside. As if the tap wasn't echoing, it was answering. Then the pattern changed. 7 seconds became 5, then 3, then a pause, then another tap. Deeper, louder, from below. The AI logged it as potential biological rhythmic anomaly. Echo 7 continued to descend. At 2,800 meters, the tap stopped. But that's when the pressure monitors picked up something odd. Microcompressions, not from above. Not the usual descent pressure, from the side, like the water was pulsing. Not violently, just enough to make the external sensors tremble. Like standing in a silent room and feeling a bass line you can't quite hear. At 3,100 meters, Echo 7's external lights caught something, not an object. A shadow, not a shape, just the absence of one. The seafloor had disappeared from view. Visibility dropped to 0. No turbulence, no silt cloud, just a curtain of dark where light should have gone. The onboard camera flickered, and then the audio log recorded this. Are we hearing this? Or is it hearing us? Spoken by Dr. Lucien Frey, the technician overseeing the dive from the surface vessel Nocturne Blue. His voice cracked slightly when he said it. Not afraid, just uncertain. That was the last human voice recorded on the mission. At 3,500 meters, the hull sensors detected a temperature drop, 6 degrees in 14 seconds. That's impossible at that depth. Water doesn't shift like that. It takes hours, sometimes days, for deep water to change temp. But the reading was verified by all sensors. Then came the oscillations. Low-frequency, evenly spaced pulses, not emitted by Echo 7, coming from beneath. 4 pulses, silence, 4 more, then a warble. When run through software, the wave pattern produced something unexpected. Symmetry. It looked like a waveform that had been mirrored. Some researchers believed it was deliberate sonar, a signal being bounced off Echo 7 to measure its internal shape, like someone or something was scanning it back. And then everything stopped. At 3,750 meters, all transmissions ceased, not interrupted. Ceased. No error logs, no signal fade. Just the last ping, a 5-second acoustic loop, later translated into a possible Morse pattern. H-E-L-L. Not hell, not help, just H-E-L-L. And then nothing. The final data packet, recovered days later from the surface relay drone, contained a corrupted audio file. 3 minutes of static, then one word buried so faintly beneath the noise that it took 3 days of audio separation to extract it. Again, not shouted, not distorted, just whispered, like something repeating, something it had only recently learned. The Echo 7 was never found. No debris, no beacon, no oil slick, just silence. And in the weeks that followed, strange things happened. Fishermen in Madeira reported their sonar units chirping with phantom taps, like fingers on glass. A Portuguese Navy exercise was delayed after an unexpected pressure fluctuation forced a sub to surface early, and one autonomous buoy off the Azores recorded 4 identical pulses exactly 13 seconds apart, the same pattern Echo 7 had received. Theories. Oh yes, Theory 1, subsea floor venting. A rare hydrothermal event may have triggered a localized collapse or distortion in the water column, disrupting the sub's sensors and causing it to sink or drift out of range. Except, no such activity was recorded, and the descent path showed no instability. Theory 2, acoustic hallucination. Could prolonged exposure to deep sea pressure and low-frequency sound cause audio illusions? Possibly. But Echo 7 wasn't manned. Its mind was AI, and AI doesn't hallucinate. Theory 3, contact. That the tapping wasn't a side effect, but a message. That somewhere in the abyss, something else is listening, waiting. And when it hears back, it responds, or mimics, or learns. But here's the part that never made the official reports. A month after the disappearance, a technician analyzing the audio logs saw something strange. When the full 42-minute tap sequence was plotted on a visual grid, it formed a shape, not a sound wave, not a code, but an outline, a curve, a spiral, a loop, not quite circular, not quite fractal, a fingerprint. And at the center, silence. The kind of silence that doesn't echo. The kind of silence that listens. So what was Echo 7 hearing? What heard back? And what did it mean when it whispered again? No one knows. But somewhere down past the range of sonar and speech, there's still a darkness wide enough to swallow sound and curious enough to return it. If you listen long enough to the deep, eventually, the deep listens back. You're drifting north now toward colder waters. The Atlantic tightens here, funneled by the Canadian coast and pressed beneath sheets of fog and storm. Icebergs slouch past in silence. The wind never stops blowing. Seabirds wheel in the gray above. And beneath the surface, bones, not human, not organic, but bones nonetheless. This is the Labrador Shelf off the coast of Newfoundland, and what lies here shouldn't exist, because no Navy, no historian, no satellite surveillance ever recorded what divers found at 62 degree, 51 degree. They call it the Submarine Boneyard, but the name doesn't really fit, because these aren't wrecks. They're not rusted, not cracked, not broken. They're intact. Let's rewind. In 1999, a Canadian Geological Survey team was scanning for mineral deposits along the Labrador slope. Their sonar began glitching, not failing, just stuttering. The pulses returned in staccato, like they were bouncing off too many hard surfaces in rapid succession. The techs assumed they'd passed over an old ship graveyard, maybe dumped cargo vessels' Cold War hulks. So they launched a towed camera array, and what it saw made one of the engineers vomit, not out of fear, but out of confusion. Spread across a stretch of seafloor more than 800 meters wide were dozens of long, sleek metallic hulls, submarine-shaped, perfectly spaced, aligned nose to tail in a neat double row, like coffins in formation. Each was nearly 30 meters long, matte gray, with no visible numbers, symbols, or insignia. No barnacles, no corrosion, no marine life growing on them. That's not how wrecks behave. That's not how time behaves. They looked parked. The camera feed was archived quietly. The site was marked. And then it was classified. 2 years later, a special Canadian-American team sent down an ROV. Smaller, quieter, built for closer inspection. They found 14 of the hulls identical in dimension. Others slightly varied, some narrower, some with wider tails, but all shared the same properties. No seams, no propellers, no hatches, No periscopes, no ports, just long, unbroken forms, smooth, polished, still. And they weren't resting on the seabed. They were embedded into it, sunk halfway into sediment, like they'd settled there long ago and simply never decayed. But the strangest part, no sonar return. When pings were sent from above, the objects barely echoed. They were dense enough to disrupt current, but soft enough somehow not to reflect sound. Like sonar passed through them and came back thinner. The ROV got within 3 meters of the nearest one. That's when it lost signal. Just a blink, a hiccup, 10 seconds of black screen. When the feed resumed, the ROV was 17 meters farther away. No drift, no propulsion, just moved. Later, in reviewing the footage, frame-by-frame analysts saw something between the blackout frames. A flicker, a ripple in the sediment beneath the holes, like something had twitched. They checked the seabed charts again. No fault lines, no vent fields, no tectonic activity, just stillness. So the theories began. Theory 1, a Cold War storage site. Maybe these were unmanned drone subs dumped and forgotten by a nation that no longer needed them. But why bury them in the sediment? Why no numbers? Why no aging? Theory 2, natural formation. Some proposed they were mineral deposits shaped by erosion and mistaken for machines, but the symmetry was too perfect. The alignment too straight, and whoever heard of stone that absorbs sonar? Theory 3, recovered tech. A fringe group believes these aren't ours, not built by us, that they were found somewhere else and placed here, hidden beneath cold and pressure, where no one would look. That this isn't a boneyard, it's a quarantine. Then there's Theory 4, that these are shells, not machines, not rocks, but remains, husks of what? Something old, older than human navies, older than the sea charts, something that rose, moved, and left these behind. And if that's true, what are they made of? Why haven't they decayed? And why hasn't anyone taken one? Here's where things get weirder. In 2008, a private research firm attempted to retrieve one of the smaller hulls. They dropped a grapple rig. It hooked, winch engaged, and nothing moved, not even an inch. The cable snapped, not from weight, but resonance. It vibrated itself apart, as if something had shaken it loose from within. They didn't try again. They did leave a sonar buoy behind, though, to monitor the site, just in case. And once a month, like clockwork, it records a soft pulse. Not a seismic rumble, not an animal, just a single low-frequency sound, a kind of thump like a heartbeat echoing through stone. It comes from beneath the largest of the hulls. Always at the same time, Arrow 3, 11 a.m. GMT, exactly 31 days apart. Every time, no more, no less. That's not erosion. That's not tectonics. That's a schedule. So what is Nashas and Ionian Kindidin? 1. Chas nan disan gameshis and miquakun senor. What a Samaritan de Queen, Akasas Alashir, Rokensiard Gisa Mayuzwar, are a battlefield, a failed experiment, or the waiting room for something that never quite died. There are no answers, just long metal shapes lined up beneath the Atlantic fog, lined up too neatly, too quietly, like something that left itself behind. One of the last researchers to visit the area left a simple note in his mission log, a sentence with no explanation, just 6 words. These aren't wrecks, they're eggs. And after that, the site was marked restricted. The coordinates erased from public maps. The sonar buoys turned off, as if someone decided enough listening, as if something had been stirring. And maybe, just maybe, the boneyard isn't sleeping. It's waiting to hatch. You're not supposed to be here. Not in this part of the Pacific. Not this deep. Not near this trench. The ocean here isn't mapped. It isn't toured. It isn't even studied, not officially. This is where the records thin out, where missions disappear into redacted margins and research vessels go silent before docking again, where coordinates are scribbled once and then scratched out forever. This is the Tonga Trench, and near its deepest fold sits a place only referred to in internal naval files as Borehole Zulu. If the name sounds like a drill site, you're not far off. But no one ever drilled here, at least not for oil. Let's go back to 1994, when the US Navy partnered with an unnamed agency, possibly no AA, possibly not, to test a new deep-sea acoustic relay. The relay was a passive device designed to sit on the trench floor and listen. Not transmit, not analyze, just record. For 31 hours it worked. Then abruptly, it transmitted a single garbled signal, then stopped. The signal was described in the report as short-range, high-frequency triplet pulses, intercut with modulated interference. Unknown source, not geological. And beneath that, a handwritten note from the mission lead: do not attempt retrieval. But of course, someone did. They always do. In 1997, a private contract vessel operating under a false survey license was dispatched to retrieve the relay. The crew launched an ROV, which descended to 9,300 meters, where the relay was last pinged. They didn't find it, but they found something else. A cavity, a circular depression in the trench wall, nearly 30 meters wide and perfectly round. Not collapsed, not sedimented. Clean, too clean. Like something had been pulled out of the crust, not drilled, extracted. The ROV recorded 14 minutes of video, then static, then an acoustic burst that knocked out the surface ship's sonar array. It was recovered 2 days later. The onboard footage had been corrupted except for a single still frame, a circular wall, jet black, reflective, almost wet-looking, even under pressure. No features, just depth and something like light moving along the edges. But light doesn't bend like that underwater. After this incident, Borehole Zulu was sealed on paper and at sea. Nations began rerouting subsea cable plans. No AA removed certain coordinates from their open access databases, and all dive requests in the region denied, until 2003, when a second classified expedition occurred, this time manned. A modified research sub call sign Gamma Shelf was dropped into the trench under the guise of testing thermal vent imaging systems. What they actually wanted, to confirm the existence of what had now been named the Arc Door. They got down to 900 meters. The pilot logged mild turbulence, electromagnetic interference, then a sudden loss of depth control. For 10 full minutes, the sub floated, not sank, not hovered, floated upward in a water column that should have crushed it. When they regained control, they were above the trench lip hundreds of meters from where they'd been seconds ago. The pilot's voice on the recording was steady, but his breathing wasn't. He said, "There's something under us, shaped like a loop. No structure, just difference." That's the best description we have. The sub returned safely. The mission was labeled inconclusive, and then erased. What wasn't erased? The audio, because for the final 47 seconds of the dive, a sound filled the sub low. Rhythmic, nearly subliminal, almost a chant, patterned like language, but beneath the range of human speech. The scientists called it a resonance artifact. Others, they called it a warning. Years passed. Nothing surfaced. No updates. No papers. Just silence. Until 2011, when an engineer from the original 1994 mission, now retired, leaked a transcript from the relay's first and only data packet. The message read, Detected breach pattern. Confirmed entry. Loop status unstable. Recommend seal. Do not reinitiate sequence. That single line shook the community. Breach pattern. Entry. Sequence. From what and by whom? Some speculated that Borehole Zulu wasn't an accident. It wasn't a failed relay. It was a lock, or worse, a key, something built to keep something else quiet. And the relay, not listening outward, listening inward. Because maybe the ocean isn't hiding things in the trenches. Maybe it's hiding things beneath them. After the leak, nothing more was said publicly. But internally, the region was designated as a no-fly, no-dive zone. NATO submersible routes were rerouted, and a quiet directive was passed to deep-sea contractors. No operations within 30 kilometers of Zulu coordinates. Acoustic anomalies unresolved. Thermal activity unreliable. Compliance mandatory. So what is Borehole Zulu? A failed experiment, an ancient scar, or a door? And if it's a door, who closed it? And what's behind it? There's one last entry in the debrief notes of the 2003 dive. The pilot asked how he knew the thing. Below him wasn't just rock, just shadow said, because when we turned off the lights, it was still glowing. No source, no reflection, just light. From inside the dark, the kind of light that doesn't want to be seen, but knows when it's being watched. So maybe the warning was real. Maybe it wasn't for us. Maybe it was for it. Because we didn't open Borehole Zulu, we just knocked, and something knocked back. You're drifting along the seafloor again, but this time, you're not alone. Not really. Because somewhere hidden under sediment and cables, something is already here, listening. It doesn't hum. It doesn't blink. It doesn't even move, but it's always been there. This is the legacy of Janus, a forgotten deep ocean surveillance program, whose only real mistake was working too well. Let's rewind to 1986. The Cold War was grinding toward its twilight. Nuclear subs moved silently across oceans like ghosts, monitored only by a fragile network of underwater microphones strung out like spider webs across the seafloor. The U.S. Navy wanted something more, something smarter, so they launched Project Janus, a classified program named after the Roman god, with two faces. One that looks forward and one that looks back. Janus was different from existing sonar nets. Instead of broadcasting and listening, it was purely passive. Not a grid, not a wall, a nest. It used micronodes, each the size of a grapefruit, buried deep into the seafloor at staggered depths and angles. These nodes could pick up the subtlest disturbances in water pressure, temperature, or resonance. The installation site, a trench system in the South Atlantic near the mid-ocean ridge, a place few ships crossed where background noise was minimal and marine life sparse. Perfect for listening. Janus went online in 1989, and for 2 years, it listened. Nothing unusual at first, just the creaks and sighs of the deep. Then in 1991, the system began registering non-random acoustic patterns, not seismic, not biological, something else. At first they were faint, like breathing through stone, but then they got stronger. Pulses, thumps, not directional, but circular, as if they were surrounding something. The system's AI, called Minerva, flagged them as anomalies and logged them by location. Each anomaly was tagged with a simple label gate. Gate 1, Gate 2, Gate 3. There were 6, but only Gate 4 ever responded. Let's talk about Gate 4. It wasn't a location. It wasn't a structure. It was a zone, a region of the ocean floor, about 1.4 kilometers wide, where acoustic signals behaved incorrectly. Sonar didn't bounce properly. Sounds seemed to curve unnaturally. And twice a year, precisely 6 months apart, the Janus nodes would detect a spike, not a burst, a step, as if a switch had been flipped. and something had woken up. Minerva logged these events carefully. It began predicting them, and when it did, something eerie happened. The anomaly started to respond. Gate 4 began returning matching pulses, not echoes, answers, different rhythm, same frequency, like a conversation across a canyon. Minerva requested permission to modify its own listening routines to repattern its pulse detection to better match the anomaly's timing. The request was approved, and after that, the system started logging new entries, coordinates, times, intervals. Some called them appointments. On June 3rd, 1993, a technician named Edward Brolin watched in real time as the system generated a waveform that resembled a double helix. He assumed it was a glitch, but the signal wasn't random. When converted to binary and mapped visually, it formed a spiral, a shape eerily similar to sonar pulses found later in the Borehole Zulu records. But that hadn't happened yet. Janus was first. Then came the moment that shut it all down. On December 11th, 1994, the nodes around Gate 4 all went silent at once. Not broken, just quiet. No readings, no return. For exactly 21 minutes. And when they came back online, they reported a single pulse in unison. A triplet. 3 tones, low, high, low. Simple, but unmistakable. And the last signal the system ever recorded. Because 72 hours later, Project Janus was terminated. No formal reason given. The ocean floor nodes were left in place. Minerva was archived and sealed. And Gate 4, officially, it was never real. But someone kept watching. Because in 2001, a seismic research team scanning the same trench registered an echo from an unknown depth. Not a quake, not a fault shift, an inverted wave, sound traveling upward, not down. The pattern matched a fragment from Minerva's archive, a tone that had no business being heard again, except now it was louder. And it wasn't coming from the trench floor. It was coming from inside the shelf wall itself. That shouldn't be possible. Rock doesn't resonate like that. It doesn't broadcast, but this one did. One researcher called it a sleeper node, a pocket of unknown material vibrating as if it had absorbed Minerva's signals, and now was echoing them back. That node has never stopped. Every few years, another pulse, quiet, faint, like a ticking clock no one can find. So what was Project Janus? A mistake or a success? Because if you build a system to listen long enough, really listen, you have to be ready for something to talk back. And Gate 4, it wasn't a door. It was a mouth, one that didn't open, but simply waited. And when we listened, it whispered, not in words, not in commands, just in recognition, as if it had been heard before. And this time, it remembered. You're not drifting now, you're hiding. Somewhere in the North Atlantic, far below the waves, in a submarine that's gone silent. Engines off, lights dimmed, weapons powered down. Not because you're under attack, but because of what just passed overhead. This is NATO Sub 421, part of a multinational naval exercise, codenamed Leviathan, conducted in March of 2009. It was supposed to be a routine operation, a test of long-range coordination, sonar triangulation, stealth communication. But by the end of the week, every file from Leviathan was locked away, and the protocol itself canceled without a trace. Let's begin at 03:46 a.m. March 18th. Sub 421 was gliding at a depth of 1,300 meters along a quiet ridge near the mid-Atlantic. There were no storms, no traffic, no anomalies on sonar. Then the hull sensors pinged, not sound, not pressure, but motion from below. At first, they assumed it was a thermal front, a rising column of warm water. Those can shift instruments briefly, like undersea mirages, but the pattern was too clean. It was vertical, a solid rising object moving directly upward from a depth the sub wasn't even cleared to reach. The object had no cavitation, no propulsion signature, no turbulence, just a massive column of silence climbing at nearly 4 knots. Sub 421's passive sonar array recorded the acoustic shadow as it passed. It was over 150 meters long and not uniform. There were segments like vertebrae or armor plating, each section slightly wider than the last, tapering toward a narrow top, like a tooth or a tower. Then it passed the sub, never once pinging back, and at the exact moment it cleared the sonar envelope, the entire ocean above them shimmered. Not visibly. There were no windows at that depth, but the sonar display flickered. It showed nothing for exactly 11 seconds. No sea, no waves, just blankness, as if the ocean above had ceased to exist. And when the display came back, the object was gone. Completely. It hadn't reached the surface. It hadn't turned or descended. It had vanished. The officers on board logged it as an unidentified vertical anomaly. The sonar tech, however, wrote something else in his personal notes. It felt like we were being scanned. Like it wasn't traveling, it was looking. The ship surfaced 40 minutes later. When they reached communication range, they sent a brief report up the chain. Then came the order. Return to port. Immediately, the rest of Leviathan was called off. No debrief, no explanation, and no mention of what Sub 421 had seen. The sonar logs were scrubbed, the visual mapping wiped, and the crew quietly reassigned. But some details survived. A technician from the German side of the operation leaked a fragment of the sonar map. It shows a silhouette unlike any known vessel. Not a whale, not a rockfall, not a thermal distortion, just a long segmented shadow. Each segment was spaced 13 meters apart, and at the bottom, a strange circular distortion, a wave inversion, where sound had bent the wrong way. When overlaid with other recordings from previous unexplained contacts, a pattern emerged. The inversion had happened before. In 1996, in 1984, in 1971, same time of year, same trench system, same vertical distortion, and each time, a sub nearby was ordered to surface and return to port. Quietly, unceremoniously, like someone was watching, not the object, but us. Theories came fast. Theory 1, unknown submarine. Some believed it was a classified test, a vertical launch stealth sub from a defense contractor operating off book, but the size was too large, the silence too perfect, and why surface vertically at 4 knots? That's not how you test. Theory 2, geological structure, a mobile magma vent or an undersea plume displacing water, but that wouldn't explain the vertebrae pattern, or the sonar blackout, or the total absence of any heat signature. Theory 3, deep sea creature, a biological explanation, something alive, slow, ancient, something that doesn't use sound to move, but absorbs it. Marine biologists dismissed it, but not all of them. One an acoustic specialist said, "We've cataloged thousands of unknown underwater sounds, but this isn't just unknown, it's aware." And then there's Theory 4, the one whispered by analysts with old clearance codes and tired eyes. That Leviathan wasn't named after the object, it was named after what we were trying to contact, that the protocol was a test not of coordination, but of awakening. That NATO had mapped this region for years, tracking pulses and echoes that didn't come from us. And when they got close, too close, it rose, not to attack, not to communicate, just to remind us It was still there. There's one more detail. A surface buoy near the anomaly's last known location continued to transmit for 48 hours after the event. Its final message, a short sonar log showing a spiral wake pattern, as if something vast had coiled through the sea without displacing any water. The timestamp is 3:03 a.m., the exact same moment the ocean disappeared from Sub 421 screens. After that, the buoy fell silent. All records from Leviathan were sealed under Omega-9 clearance, a classification normally reserved for nuclear misfires or underwater weapons tests. And the protocol itself scrubbed from NATO's database, as if it had never existed. So what passed over Sub 421? A whale the size of a cathedral, a vertical ship, a god, something that doesn't need engines, or fins, or words, something that has always been here, just deep enough to miss, just long enough to forget. And when we looked too hard, it looked back. You are adrift again. But this time you're already too late. The water here is cold, Arctic-fed, iron-rich, streaked with ancient silt, from a shelf that collapses every few thousand years without warning. There are no coral reefs, no fishing boats, no steady shipping lanes, just wind, and somewhere below you, the sound of something ending. This is the Fram Strait between Greenland and Svalbard, one of the deepest and most geologically unstable regions in the Arctic Ocean. And it's where the sentinel Aegir disappeared, not beneath the waves, not over the horizon, but in the middle of a sentence. Let's go back to October 3rd, 2014. The sentinel Aegir was a semi-autonomous research vessel part, surface part submersible. It was designed by a coalition of northern research institutes to glide just below the ocean's surface, using a hybrid electric drive system to remain silent, slow, and nearly invisible. Its mission was simple: follow the East Greenland Current North Record thermocline data monitor, ambient sound, and return after 28 days. It made it to day 14, and then something changed. Not in the ship. In the ocean, the first sign was acoustic drift. At Fro 3, 11 Froy, even A, and M, the Aegir's onboard sensors began registering conflicting sound layers, multiple overlapping frequencies rising through the water, none of which matched marine life or seismic activity. Think of it like hearing 5 radios playing different songs, all underwater, all just slightly out of sync. Then the temperature shifted, not gradually, instantly. The water dropped by 8 degrees Celsius in 17 seconds. No weather system can cause that. No cold front moves that fast. No upwelling. No ice calving. It was as if the water was being drained, replaced with something older. The Aegir's AI sent a warning to base. It read simply, "Thermal breach. Pattern resembles void sink." That phrase, void sink, wasn't part of any normal reporting protocol. It had been programmed in manually by a designer named Lena Holtz, who had previously worked on Borehole Zulu. Why she added that phrase is unknown, but it triggered an automatic mode hard drift. The Aegir powered down propulsion and allowed itself to float, trying to escape the anomaly without active interference. It worked. For 7 minutes, then came the tap. A single impact on the hull, not from a collision, not from a creature, but from something that left no signature, no wake, just a dull contact like a knuckle against a steel drum, followed by another, then 3 more, then 12, perfectly spaced, encircling the sub, as if something was walking along the hull in the dark. The onboard system issued one last update, unidentified contact surrounding, stillness increasing, mass anomaly present, then nothing. At first, the control center assumed loss of signal, but then a distress burst was received. It lasted 1.2 seconds, and in that moment, The Aegir transmitted 5 pieces of data, depth 3, 181 meters, far deeper than its maximum range. Internal pressure, nominal. Hull temp falling, acoustic return null. Text, still. And then, silence. The Aegir was gone. No debris, no beacon, no automated resurfacing. But the odd part, 3 hours later, a wave barely measurable passed across the surface, recorded by a Russian meteorological buoy nearby. Not a tidal surge, just a flattening of the ocean, as if something had pressed gently against it from below, and then retracted. Satellite photos later showed a circular slick nearly 90 meters across, spreading from a single point like oil. But there was no oil, no signature, just water that looked too smooth, like a mirror had been dropped across the sea. Speculation began. Theory 1. Icequake. A massive glacial shift beneath the seabed could have created pressure waves pulling the sub down and crushing it instantly. But that would have triggered seismic alarms across 4 nations. None were recorded. Theory 2. Instrument failure. A systems error cascading failures and confusion at the AI level, except the transmissions were clear, coherent, and that word, still, repeated 3 times, as if trying to explain a condition, not a malfunction. Theory 3. Contact. That something was in the water. Not a creature, not a vehicle, something else. And that contact wasn't collision. It was collection. That whatever it was didn't smash the Aegir. It took it whole. Some whispered that the final transmission still was a reference to motion. That the Aegir was being pulled into a space where motion didn't exist. Where pressure dropped, not rose. Where sound went quiet without echo. A null zone, not natural, not explainable, just wrong. There's one last piece. 17 months later, a commercial fishing vessel in the Barents Sea retrieved part of a research buoy entangled in a long line. It had no markings, no GPS tag, but when it was powered up, it emitted a faint signal, a looping audio file, just 4 words in a woman's voice, fragmented and static-ridden, but still clear. Turn off the sky. No one knows what it means. But the timestamp embedded in the file, 03:11 a.m., the exact moment the Aegir vanished, same time the taps began, same time the sea fell still. So maybe that's what happened. Maybe the ocean opened, and something not violent, not angry, just interested, reached in and pulled, not to destroy, but to study. And in the process, erased something so thoroughly that the only thing left was stillness. Not silence, stillness, like a page being turned underwater, like a curtain slowly falling, like the space where sound stops, but nothing else has begun. That's what the Aegir became. And maybe somewhere it's still drifting, not lost, not broken, just paused. You're about to enter a place where nothing electronic survives, not for long anyway, no matter how expensive, no matter how shielded. Every machine that goes down here returns dead or doesn't return at all. This is the Challenger Rift, a jagged fault line fracture within the Mariana Trench near the Western Pacific. Not the deepest point on Earth, but close, and definitely the strangest. Because Challenger Rift doesn't destroy what we send to it. It silences it completely. Let's start in 1995. A joint mission between Japan and the United States launched a deep-diving AUV named Takuyo. It was a rugged little thing, pressurized beyond industry standard, fitted with radiation sensors, and a cutting-edge multi-frequency sonar suite. Its objective, to chart mineral formations and collect sediment samples from the rift wall. Takuyo descended without issue. At 920 meters, everything was normal. At 9400 meters, the lights flickered. Then came the static. The sonar feed began glitching. Readings bounced erratically, as if the seafloor had turned to jelly. GPS dropped out. Signal strength weakened. The sediment scanner returned identical values over and over again, like it was stuck in a loop. Then just as quickly it cleared. Everything returned to normal, except one thing: the clock. The internal mission timer had jumped backward by 7 minutes. It wasn't frozen. It had ticked, then reset, as if something had rewound the drone's internal perception of time. Command issued a return order. Takuyo began ascending. At 6,200 meters, the signal cut out again. And this time, it didn't come back. When the surface crew finally retrieved the drone via its emergency beacon, what they found made no sense. The casing was intact, the instruments physically unharmed, but every chip inside fried. No signs of overheating, no short circuits, just blank boards, like someone had wiped every piece of memory by hand. Even the black box was gone, not erased. Gone, ripped out cleanly, with no damage to the surrounding panel. Takuyo was never used again. But over the next 20 years, 12 more missions attempted to survey the rift. All 12 reported similar events: signal dropout at depths between 9,200 and 9,500 meters, memory corruption, power draw anomalies, directional drift without propulsion, and one disturbing commonality: every final transmission just before failure included a reading logged as acoustic saturation full. That doesn't happen. Sound doesn't fill the ocean. It moves through it. So what does it mean when the water becomes so saturated that no more sound can fit? In 2010, a French expedition dubbed this region the Dead Zone, not because people died, but because everything else does. A theory emerged that this wasn't just a trench, it was a field, a zone of interference, not magnetic, not radioactive, but something deeper, an information sink, where data goes in but doesn't come back. An ROV from the Philippines, fitted with acoustic mappers, sent back one partial image before failure. It showed a structure near the rift wall, not coral, not rock, a looped column, a spiral of dark material extending vertically from the sediment like a corkscrew planted into the seafloor. No symmetry, no marine growth, just shape, and then static. A team from Seoul attempted to confirm the structure with a higher fidelity sonar sweep in 2014. But when they reached the same depth, their data logs recorded a different anomaly. The sonar showed them their own submersible already on the ocean floor waiting. It had duplicated them, a sonar ghost, not a reflection. A match with their depth, their shape, their orientation. It was as if something below had copied them and projected the image upward. Then their sonar cut out. The sub returned safely, but their data useless, encrypted, scrambled by patterns that looked almost like language, repeating symbols, intersecting curves, not machine failure, interference, and not just any interference. Deliberate interference. Theory after theory was proposed. Theory 1, gravitational lensing. Perhaps something about the rift distorts not just space but time. That the jump in Takuyo's internal clock wasn't random, it was evidence of a localized time slip. But no tectonic fault can cause that. Gravity wells don't behave that way. Theory 2, Earth resonance. A vibration from within the planet, like a harmonic zone, tuned to a frequency we can't measure. Possible, but harmonics don't destroy hard drives. Theory 3, active defense. That's something down there. Something ancient is warding off intrusion. Like a gatekeeper, not mechanical, just purposeful, designed to fail anything that reaches too deep. And then there's Theory 4, that the Challenger rift isn't a rift, that it's a scar, not carved by nature, but left by something massive long ago, something that crashed or landed or emerged. And what we think of as geological instability is just the final pulse of its presence, a kind of echo that breaks anything that tries to record it. Because sometimes the ocean doesn't want to kill you. It just wants you to stop asking. There's one last detail. In 2018, a weather monitoring buoy near the Mariana Trench logged a strange echo bouncing up through the water column. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sharp, just a low, quiet drone, recorded at 9,422 meters, the exact depth of every major failure. The drone lasted 13 minutes, growing fainter, not louder, as if it were ascending. And when the sound was processed, it revealed a waveform with repetition, a pulse, then a break, then 3 more pulses, then nothing. No response, no follow-up. Just that one lonely sound, trying just once to rise. Maybe it was a call, maybe it was a warning, or maybe it was all that was left of a machine that had fallen too far, tried too hard, and learned what it shouldn't have. The Challenger Rift remains untouched. All new expeditions avoided. Unspoken policy, unwritten law, not because of what we found, but because of what we couldn't. Because if sound can't escape, what else might still be trapped down there, waiting, not for rescue, but for silence? Now you drift toward the western Indian Ocean, where monsoon winds rage above, but the water below sits still, eerily still. You're somewhere off the coast of Madagascar, but not on any shipping map. This patch of sea is avoided, not because it's dangerous, but because nothing ever happens here. No fishing, no reefs, no currents, just water so quiet it hums in your bones. And beneath that hum in 2002, a recovery vessel dredged up something impossible. They called it the Bell of Acor, and no one has yet explained what it really is. Let's go back. The vessel was contracted to perform deep seabed sampling, scraping layers of mineral-rich sediment from more than 4,000 meters down. Routine, lucrative, boring. On the 10th dive, the suction pipe jammed. Divers were sent down, assuming a stone or chunk of manganese had clogged the vacuum. What they found was metal, not just scrap, a perfectly round, hollow object wedged into the mud. It was shaped like a bell, but upside down. Thin stem flared base with a smooth surface that hadn't corroded a bit, even though it had clearly been there for a long time. They freed it and brought it aboard. That's when the anomalies began. First it was cold, not just chilled from the deep, but actively cold, colder than the surrounding seawater by 8 degrees Celsius. And it stayed cold, even in sunlight. Second, it had no seams, no joins, no welds, no marks of tooling, just a single solid object, as if cast from a mold that didn't exist. Third, it rang, not like a bell. It emitted a pulse, not audible, subsonic. Every 43 seconds, a low vibration that tickled the fillings in the crew's teeth. Some said it felt like pressure behind the eyes. Others described it like a hum that never quite reached the ears, but could still be felt. They logged it, measured it. The frequency was consistent, 17.04 hertz, low enough to cause dizziness in some, anxiety in others, but always regular. The onboard geologist refused to touch it, said it made her remember things she hadn't learned yet. Eventually, the bell was stored in a lead-lined container and transferred to an offshore lab in Mauritius. 3 days later, the lab lost power, not to the island, just to the storage chamber. When they broke in, the bell was gone. No breach, no door open, just gone. And on the floor, where it had rested, a shallow imprint, not burned, not corroded, just warped. The floor beneath had softened, like heat had passed through it. Only the bell was still cold. Security footage showed nothing. No one entered or exited the room, not even mice. But one camera aimed at the chamber recorded 11 seconds of visual distortion, like the lens had warped or like space itself had rippled. The Bell of Acor has never been found again. But strange reports followed in the years after. A small fishing vessel reported a low ringing sound beneath their hull near Seychelles. Their compass spun. 2 crew passed out from nausea. An oil survey team recorded unexplained 1704 hertz vibrations north of Comoros pulsing like clockwork for 6 days. A Navy sonar operator flagged a pattern off Diego Garcia that showed a structured repeating pattern consistent with machine code, all in the same area, all circling the place where the bell was first found. Theories flooded in. Theory 1, alien artifact. Maybe it fell from space, landed millennia ago. Its shape, smooth and seamless, seemed too perfect. But it had no outer scarring, no cosmic dust. And why hide it at the bottom of the sea? Theory, too ancient human tech. Perhaps it was from a lost civilization, some advanced pre-Ice Age culture. The ocean has swallowed cities before. Why not this? But the material didn't match any known alloy. And the object was too perfect machine tolerance within 2 microns. That's not hand-forged. Theory 3, biological artifact. That it wasn't made but grown. That the bell was organic, some kind of pressure-regulating organ from a creature too large to comprehend. Fossilized. Preserved. Still functioning, still ringing. But why? Then came a 4th theory, one nobody laughed at, that it wasn't an object at all. It was a key, or worse, a tuning fork. That the low-frequency pulse wasn't an artifact of construction, but intentional. A signal, not to us, but to something else. And that by dredging it up, by exposing it to air and light and measurement, we had activated it. Called something, or restarted something that had been asleep. Because after its disappearance, one final detail surfaced. A sailor from the original recovery ship kept an audio diary. Unpublished, never shared, until his daughter uploaded it to a now defunct blog years later. In the last entry, he said, "When I was on night watch, I'd go below deck. I'd just sit near the bell. Couldn't help it. Felt drawn. And one night, I swear I saw something on the metal. Just for a second. A reflection. But not mine. He died 2 months after the mission. Massive cardiac failure. No history, no warning." And in his journal, tucked between pages, was a sketch. It looked like the bell, but with 3 others around it, smaller, in a triangle. And beneath it, one word, harmony. So maybe the bell wasn't alone. Maybe it was part of something larger, a system, a chorus. And we pulled one voice too early. We interrupted the song. And the sea doesn't forget that kind of thing. The waters near the bell's origin site are now off limits, not officially. But ships don't pass through. Drones lose power there. Buoys drift out of range. And every now and then, hydrophones pick up something from below. Just one note, low, steady. A bell that no one rang. Still waiting, still singing. There's a place in the South Pacific where maps go fuzzy. Not blank, just suspiciously vague. No depths listed. No currents annotated. Just a nameless blue square labeled with 2 words, survey pending. But the truth is, surveys have happened there. They just didn't come back. This is Grid 89, located roughly 700 nautical miles west of Easter Island. It's one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth. There are no islands nearby, no fishing zones, and no known tectonic faults. It's empty. But in 2013, a deep-sea imaging team sent a submersible there anyway. Privately funded, quietly operated, no government logos, no press releases. Just a few scientists, some sonar equipment, and a ship with a broken transponder that no one logged. They were looking for volcanic chimneys, thermal vents that might hold clues to early marine life evolution. What they found instead was geometry. The submersible, a lightweight crawler named Pelican 9, descended to 4,900 meters. The bottom was flat, unnaturally flat, not sand, not silt, but smooth stone. A plate, they said, miles wide, stretching in all directions, featureless, but warm to the touch. That's not normal. Stone doesn't conduct heat like that. And the deeper they scanned, the weirder it got, because sonar revealed edges, straight lines, intersecting at right angles. Under the surface, they were under a structure, but not a building, not ruins in the archaeological sense. This wasn't made of bricks or pillars. It was one solid piece, as if the entire seafloor was just the top layer of something deeper, something buried perhaps intentionally. The Pelican 9 rolled forward. At 70 meters, it reached a rise. A platform, atop it, a perfect square, 10 meters across. Each side equidistant, each corner razor sharp, and at the center, a circular depression about the size of a car tire, perfectly centered. No debris, no life, just balance. Symmetry so unnatural that it made the pilot nauseous. He later described it like this. You ever look at a tiled floor and realize every tile is exactly the same distance from you? That's what it felt like. Like the space around me was being measured while I moved. They sent down sonar pulses. The return wasn't normal. Instead of bouncing back like it should have, the ping went downward and never came back. A sink, as if the sonar had found a hole too deep to echo from. The ship above recorded a momentary pressure dip, less than 1%, but measurable. That shouldn't happen from sonar. The pilot began ascending. Then at 700 meters, the cameras cut out. Static, but the sonar continued. And what it recorded didn't make sense. Something had appeared above the crawler. Not a shape, not a shadow. A void, an outline of nothing, roughly circular, flat on the bottom, with 6 long extensions like fingers trailing behind. No movement, no sound, just an absence hovering in water. Then came a single ping, not from the crawler, from the structure below. It wasn't a response, it was a request, and in that instant, the crawler shut down. No damage, no water intrusion, just silence, like a power outage in a cathedral. They hauled Pelican 9 back to the surface. What came up wasn't what went down. Physically, it was fine. But its casing was now coated in a film. Not algae, not salt. A fine dust gray and soft that no one could explain. The pilot said it hadn't been there when they reeled it in. That he blinked, looked away, and when he looked back, the crawler looked aged, like it had been under the sea for 1,000 years. They analyzed the dust, carbon heavy, laced with compounds not found in any marine environment, traces of bismuth yttrium, and a strange crystalline structure resembling bone ash, but not from any known species. That's when the sponsor canceled the project, quietly. Efficiently. The crawler was boxed, the files sealed, the coordinates erased, but the pilot kept one thing, a snapshot from the onboard camera taken before the systems failed. A single frame, blurry, warped by pressure, but clear enough to show something. A symbol etched into the stone at the center of the platform. Not writing, not language, just a spiral inside a triangle. 3 sides, 1 curve, and the image had a glow to it, not from the lights, from within, no source, just light. The kind that doesn't reflect, just exists. Later, the pilot shared the image with a linguist specializing in pre-human symbology. She didn't hesitate, She said it looked like a warning glyph found on cave walls in Peru, in northern Siberia, and even among the oldest carvings on Malta. Always in isolation, always buried, always surrounded by silence. The linguist asked a simple question: why would the same shape appear in places no civilization ever touched? No one answered. Grid 89 has never been revisited. All shipping routes divert around it. Officially, seafloor instability. Unofficially, it's known among oceanographers as the Stone Field, a place where nothing grows, where nothing moves, where the ocean stops being an ocean and becomes something else, something flat, something watching. Because here's the part they don't include in the reports. The sonar ping that came from the structure, the one that silenced the crawler. It's been recorded once before, in 1974, by a Soviet deep-sea probe scanning off the coast of South Georgia Island. That ping was dismissed as equipment feedback. But when overlaid with the 2013 pulse, it's a perfect match. Same rhythm, same frequency, same message, a request. And if it was a request, that means it's waiting for an answer. So what is Grid 89? A ruin, a beacon, a lid. And if it's a lid, what happens if it opens? You're sailing over calm waters this time. Sun overhead, instruments normal, no pressure alarms. Just the slow roll of the Indian Ocean beneath you. Everything's fine, except that the sea floor has moved. And that's not supposed to happen. Not this fast. Not this quiet. This is the mystery of Station Y9, a small hydroacoustic monitor operated by the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services. It's located between Rodriguez Island and the Chagos Archipelago, a stable region far from trenches or fault lines. Nothing should happen here, but something did. In March of 2017, researchers at the station noticed a change in bottom echo returns. Not an error, not interference, just a slight rise about 3.4 meters in what had always been flat seabed. At first, they assumed sediment drift or a mistake in sonar calibration. But then over the next 11 days, the readings rose again, then sharply. By day 16, the seabed beneath Station I-9 had lifted more than 92 meters, still symmetrical, still smooth, like a hill was growing under the sea. And then came the pulse, a low-frequency rhythmic hum, just under 18 hertz, emitted not from the sea, but from the rising object itself. It wasn't seismic, it wasn't volcanic. It was structured, pulsing every 19 seconds. Too perfect to be natural. The station's team launched an autonomous vehicle to investigate. The AUV descended normally, and at 4,200 meters, it made contact. Not physical, acoustic. Its sonar emitted a standard sweep, and the object returned it, but not as an echo, as a modified pattern, a reply, an answer. And then the AUV surfaced, unharmed, but altered. Its internal clock was off by 4 hours. Its logbook contained corrupted entries lines of code that matched no known programming language, just repeating sequences of numbers, prime numbers, then squares, then Fibonacci, like someone or something had been testing its limits. Then came the shape. The bathymetric data showed a clean, symmetrical formation, circular base, 4 protrusions, and a central spike. It looked like a beacon, a seamount with edges. Nature doesn't make those. The team named it Anomaly 9. They sent a second vehicle, this time tethered. It never returned. The tether went limp. No struggle, no tension snap, just empty weight. When the cord was retrieved, it was cleanly cut, each fiber snipped as if by a laser. But there was no burn, just separation. Then came the report from a ship 300 nautical miles away, a private yacht that had been sailing south during the incident. Their instruments recorded a flash underwater, not visible light, something else. A moment of total GPS disorientation, then a course correction, like the sea had nudged them. And in the minutes following that event, 3 other research stations, hundreds of miles apart, recorded a similar rise, just a few centimeters, then nothing, as if a wave had passed through the Earth itself, not above it, not on it, through. What is Station I-9 watching? What did it wake up? Because the structure is still there, and it's still growing, not quickly, not menacingly, but consistently. Today it stands over 300 meters high, almost perfectly conical. It has venting fissures, but they release no gas. It has heat signatures, but no source. It has symmetry, but no variation. And every 19 seconds, it still hums. And here's the part that makes people stop asking questions. That hum. It matches the Bell of Acor. Same pitch, same rhythm, same cycle, across 2 oceans, half a world apart, and now synchronized. So now they call Station I-9 something else. They call it a convergence. The point where 2 signals meet, and maybe not by accident. Maybe they were built to find each other. Maybe the ocean has checkpoints things. It's been waiting to activate. You're in polar waters now. Wine-screaming seas black with churn, and the sky a flat white dome that swallows sound. The kind of place where everything seems still from a distance, until it isn't. This is the Larsson B ice shelf, or what's left of it. Since its dramatic collapse in 2002, it's been a graveyard of drifting ice, some chunks the size of cities, breaking and melting, drifting and dying. And in 2016, one such iceberg never melted. It never moved, and then it vanished. But not in the way ice vanishes. It didn't crack, didn't flip, didn't break. It just stopped existing and left behind photographs no one remembers taking. They called it Larsson Echo, a satellite designation for an untracked ice mass drifting northeast of the shelf. First spotted by a European radar satellite, the berg appeared unusual from the start. Perfectly symmetrical, sharp angles, no surface melt. Even in summer, when thermal imaging was applied, it showed a consistent internal temperature of 4.0 degrees Celsius. That's warm, too warm for exposed ice in that region. They flagged it, sent a reconnaissance drone to pass overhead, but the footage wasn't useful. Every time the drone approached, its instruments recorded frame skips, as if it had passed over something larger than itself and forgotten to remember it. The drone would blink, skip 6 seconds, and return with a different GPS reading off by kilometers. So they sent a crewed ship, a Norwegian research vessel, Askeladd, diverted from a nearby survey, and made visual contact with the berg within 48 hours. They described it as wrong, too smooth, too vertical. Its sides weren't cliffs of splintered ice, they were walls. Straight, flat, white without texture. One crew member described it like a block of paper perfectly stacked, soaked in cold. They launched a skiff to get closer, approached within 200 meters, and then the compass spun, first slow, then fast, and then stopped pointing straight down. The radio went static, the skiff returned, and all photographs taken during the approach were black. Not overexposed, not glitched, just black, except one, found on a waterproof disposable camera left on deck unused. One frame was exposed. It showed a white surface, featureless, but with a shadow falling across it, not cast by the sun, from above, but no aircraft were present, and the shadow, wrong shape, long, thin, bent in the middle, like a human arm, but stretched too far, too smooth. No crew member remembered seeing it. So they left. No samples collected, no touchdown. And 48 hours later, Larsson Echo was gone. The next satellite pass showed open water, no debris, no cold patch, no mass shadow, just sea. The Askeladd filed its logs. The entry for that day reads, Approached ice shelf fragment Echo 1. No structural integrity, possibly an illusion or natural light effect. No findings. Proceeding to standard path. But that's not what happened, because one file was left open on a laptop in the vessel's lab, an audio file, 6 minutes and 31 seconds long. It begins with radio chatter, then cuts, then picks up a hum low, distant, almost subsonic, then faintly a clicking pattern, rhythmic, not Morse, not marine, just clicks. 4 fast, 2 slow, repeat, and then silence, except one last sound at 6:29, a voice, flat, quiet, not human, but trying, not glacier, then static. Experts have tried to scrub the audio, enhance it, but every time they isolate the voice, the waveform behaves incorrectly. It loops back, echoes forward, fragments, as if the file isn't broken, but is trying to speak differently each time. There are theories. Theory 1, optical illusion, that Larsson Echo was a natural formation seen in strange light, misunderstood by glitching radar. But that doesn't explain the black photos or the bent shadow. Theory 2, thermal anomaly. Perhaps the iceberg contained material, volcanic, maybe that altered the readings, but it didn't melt, and all ice melts eventually. Theory 3, cloaking. A military test cloaked in environmental research. But if so, why fake a voice? Why erase the photographs? Why leave one behind? Then there's Theory 4, that Larsson Echo was never ice. It was a shape covered in something that mimicked ice, cold on the outside, warm within, not to stay hidden, but to wait. And when seen too clearly, it left. And here's what's worse. 2 months later, a fishing vessel out of Argentina drifted near Bouvet Island, a place famous for being too isolated to matter. Their sonar detected something strange below, a square 20 meters by 20 moving against the current. They didn't investigate, but their depth sounder printed the image. Sharp corners, one word scrawled beneath the readout by a sailor with a pencil, white wall. That paper was later lost in a storm, but the image stayed in records. And when compared with early shots of Larsson Echo, it matched perfectly. The same shape, the same edges, the same absence of detail. So what was it? A vehicle? A sensor? A scout? Or worse, a door? Because maybe it was never meant to be seen. And when we did, it moved. It remembered. It imitated. And then it drifted away. Not melting, not sinking, just changing its name again. Because the sea isn't just full of ancient life and alien silence. Sometimes it carries visitors, temporary, in disguise, and patient, still waiting for someone to see them. And when that happens, they leave, but not before saying, not glacier. This time, you're not in a sub. You're not piloting a drone. You're not even listening from a ship far above. You're in a dive suit, descending slowly, breath-controlled bubbles dancing around your visor like silver coins. Everything is normal until you cross depth 389, and then the ocean forgets you. It starts in the Red Sea, near the southern edge, where Africa narrows toward the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The area is warm, clear, and deceptively easy to dive in, but it hides scars beneath. Trenches, ridges, geothermal cracks. And in 2011, a research diver named Omar Syed entered one such ridge and came back without knowing where he'd been. Let's set the stage. Omar was part of a small Egyptian research team studying deep coral degradation near a fissure known as Line 17, a long fracture in the seafloor, discovered only a decade prior. Their goal? Record water samples. Document reef collapse. Photograph thermal fractures. Simple. The dive was tethered, monitored, and timed. Omar was outfitted with dual redundant rebreathers, camera rig vitals, monitor, and a simple two-way radio feed with the surface. At 9:03 a.m., he descended. At depth 312, everything was fine. At depth 348, the cameras started to blur just a little. Pressure haze, maybe. Then, at depth 389, everything stopped. Vitals normal. Oxygen stable. Camera black. Radio dead. The feed cut out completely. No panic, no movement. Just a freeze. He hovered. For 2 minutes and 13 seconds, Omar's telemetry remained live, but no visual, no audio. Then, he began ascending, slow, controlled, perfect form. At depth 180, the radio came back. He was humming, a song no one recognized. Simple. 6 notes looped. He surfaced, unaided, no distress. But when they unlatched his helmet, he stared straight ahead and asked, "Am I still down there?" They rushed him to decompression, fearing nitrogen narcosis. But his blood gas levels were fine. And then they asked what happened. He blinked, said, "I don't remember diving." He knew his name, knew the year, knew his teammates, but the dive gone. Then they checked his suit. Everything intact. No leaks, no tears. Except the external camera was missing, not broken, gone. Its mount had been unscrewed. Cleanly, deliberately, underwater. But Omar had no tools on him, no memory of removing it. Then came the final detail. Inside the camera housing wedged behind the missing lens was something new. A small object, no bigger than a coin, metallic, cool to the touch, shaped like a spiral, perfectly etched, but not corroded, not pitted, polished, as if it hadn't spent seconds underwater, but centuries. They ran a scan. The alloy didn't match any known earth metal composition. Too heavy for titanium, too soft for steel. A lab in Cairo described it as architectural, not artistic, not decorative, functional. But for what? They asked Omar again. Did he see anything? He shook his head, then paused and said, "I heard something. That was new." They asked him to explain. He said, "It wasn't words, just shape. Like my ears were folding. Like I was underwater inside the water." He said the silence wasn't empty, it was waiting. And that something touched his hand. Not grabbed, not pulled, touched, like a tap. And then it was over. Weeks passed, Omar recovered. But something stayed with him. He began sketching. Spirals, endless spirals, all identical. Some tight, some wide, but all with 3 arms. Always 3. And each drawing was signed. Not with his name, but with a symbol. The same spiral on the metal disc. He didn't remember drawing it. He said, "I dream in circles now." The team disbanded. The project dissolved. Line 17 was marked geologically unstable and removed from dive listings. But word got out. Whispers spread. Of depth 389, divers from as far as Thailand and Oman reported losing time at that depth in unrelated areas. One forgot how to speak for 5 hours. Another claimed he saw the inside of his name. None of these reports were official, but in dive forums they share a phrase, "Don't stop at 389. It's become a kind of quiet superstition, a threshold, a pressure not of water, but of memory. Because what happened to Omar didn't end that day. 3 years later, in 2014, a package was delivered anonymously to the Suez Oceanographic Archive. Inside, a notebook, old, water-damaged, filled with pages of handwriting that didn't match Omar's or anyone on the dive team. Spirals again, some overlapping, some nested, and one page at the very center blank except for a sentence, written in looping vertical strokes that ran from bottom to top. We left a piece with him. There was no return address, no fingerprints. The book was filed away and never referenced publicly, but a copy circulates among a small circle of marine anomaly researchers. They call it the line codex, and it remains untranslated. Not because it's too complex, but because it changes. Every few weeks, a new page appears in the scan. Not physically, digitally. One researcher checks the file, and a new spiral has formed. New text. Always vertical, always rising, always stopping just short of the top of the page, as if something is still climbing. So what happened at depth 389? What reached out? What removed the camera? And what did it leave behind? A coin, a tag, a signal. Maybe we weren't meant to retrieve it. Maybe it wasn't for us at all. Just a marker for something else. To find him again. Or worse, to finish the message. You're back in the North Atlantic, off the coast of Bermuda. Calm seas, long swells, lazy skies. But beneath it all, something plays on repeat. A shipwreck that won't die. This is the mystery of the USNS Cycloma, a decommissioned naval survey vessel believed lost in 1971 during a routine mapping run near the mid-Atlantic ridge. The original report was dull mechanical failure, presumed sunk, all hands lost, no distress call, no signal, no wreck found, until 2019 when it suddenly reappeared, intact, and still moving. Let's rewind. A multinational marine expedition was charting a previously unexamined fracture zone about 300 nautical miles northeast of Bermuda, an area nicknamed the Whisper Shelf for its unusually quiet sonar returns. At 02:44 a.m., their sonar pinged a surface anomaly. The signature matched a ship, not a container vessel, not a fishing boat, a military-grade displacement hull, medium-size, minimal acoustic profile, and moving at exactly 7 knots. That's slow. Deliberate. Old-fashioned. They hailed it. No response. They approached, and there, cresting the waves like it had never left, was a rust-flecked white vessel with fading blue markings, USNS Cycloma, clear across the side. No damage, no smoke, no signs of wear. Just one thing was off. It wasn't casting a radar shadow. It showed up on sonar, but not on radar. And every time it drifted beyond 800 meters, it disappeared entirely until the sonar ping found it again in the exact same place, not drifting. Resetting, the survey team sent a drone. It approached from below. At 30 meters out, the feed began to loop. 4 seconds, the same 4 seconds, again and again. It wasn't the drone, it was the world around it. Waves froze, ripples reset, debris danced identically. They reviewed the sonar data and found the Cycloma had returned to the same coordinates every 11 minutes and 9 seconds. Exactly. A loop, a ghost circuit. The wreck was moving, but it wasn't free. It was caught in something. When the team plotted its positions over the course of an hour, the result was a spiral, tight mathematical geometric, a pattern ships don't make. Then came the photograph. A surface drone captured a still image of the bridge deck. It was empty except for a figure, one person, standing midship, wearing a pressure suit from the 1960s, one used for deep-sea transfers. Faceplate fogged, arms at the side, no movement. The figure appeared in every photo, no matter the angle, no matter the time, never changing, always in the same place, the same pose. Some said it wasn't a person at all, just the impression of one. Like an image projected into the world, a memory caught and rewind. The researchers pulled historical records. USNS Cycloma's last logbook entry, dated June 17, 1971, mentioned entering a sonar dead zone and experiencing unusual hull vibration. Last sentence, atmospherics incorrect. Time echo widening. Adjusting course 6 degrees south by southwest. Then nothing. No calls, no debris, no lifeboats. Now, decades later, it had re-emerged. Only it wasn't alive. It wasn't sinking. It wasn't resting, it was repeating. Every 11 minutes and 9 seconds, the sonar ping would flicker, and the ship would be back at its starting coordinates. Weather unchanged, water unbroken, as if it had never moved. Like the entire ocean forgot it had ever been there, and it had to remind it, over and over again. A memory trapped in water. Theories. Of course. Theory 1. Phantom Echo. Some suggested it was an acoustic mirage, old sonar data, trapped in thermal layers looping back like light in a mirror maze. But that doesn't explain the visual confirmation, or the pressure suit. Theory 2. Experimental weapon. Perhaps Cycloma was testing a classified device, a temporal sonar, or some kind of predictive mapping tech. Maybe it worked too well. Maybe it still is. Theory 3. Folded space. That Cycloma passed through a null seam in the ocean floor, one of those rare fractures where time pressure and space flex just enough to trap an object mid-moment. It would explain the reset, the loop, the stillness. Theory 4. Recursion artifact. That the ship itself became a kind of recording, etched into the water, like grooves in a vinyl record. Not alive, not real, just an echo of its last path. And when sonar pings it, when we listen, it plays again, one more time, until the next ping, and the next. But there's a deeper fear that it isn't just playing back, that the Cycloma is trying to finish its loop, trying to move forward, but can't. Something in the ocean keeps pulling it back, resetting it, rewinding it, because whatever it touched, whatever folded around, it doesn't allow closure, only repetition. A few weeks after the 2019 sighting, a Navy vessel passed through the area. They reported nothing unusual, no ship, no signal. But when their sonar logs were reviewed, one anomaly. Every 11 minutes and 9 seconds, a spike, brief, identical, a flicker, still there, still trying, still stuck. So what is the Cycloma now? A time-locked wreck, a machine caught in its last command, or a scar, an echo of a choice. One final heading, one final vibration that never stopped vibrating. The sonar teams call it the needle because it keeps playing the same groove. And if you listen too long, they say, you start hearing the ocean repeat itself. We're in the South Atlantic now, just off the coast of Tristan da Cunha, the most remote inhabited island in the world. The ocean here is deep, restless, and forgetful. Ships vanish beneath it without memory. Whales sing across miles with no reply. It's a place where absence feels permanent, but one voice kept speaking, even after it had been destroyed. This is the mystery of Relay Station Atlas, an unmanned seafloor communications hub built in 1998 by an international consortium of deep ocean monitoring groups. It was basic, passive. Its job was to catch acoustic telemetry from undersea cables and push them upward via satellite. It sat at a depth of 3,700 meters, quiet and stable, until April 14, 2006, when it went offline. Not gradually, instantly. All feeds cut, all satellite beacons stopped. No final burst, just silence. A recovery mission was launched 3 weeks later. They found nothing. The platform was gone, not dismantled, not eroded, removed. The seafloor showed a perfect depression, round and smooth, where the station once stood. No debris, no cables, just an empty circle and something else. The surrounding sediment had been hardened, fused into a glass-like crust, as if exposed to immense heat. But there was no sign of volcanic activity, no quake, no pressure spike. The ocean just took it, or so it seemed, until 5 years later, in 2011, an oceanographic lab in Iceland picked up a strange signal on their passive listening equipment. It was faint, repeating every 73 minutes, composed of short bursts, 5 tones, followed by silence, then a 6th longer tone. They triangulated its origin somewhere near the former site of Relay Station Atlas. At first, they assumed it was a buoy, a lost transmitter set adrift and looping old data. But the signal wasn't on any frequency used by Atlas, and it had no registration code. Still, they listened. The tones continued for weeks. Then in July, the 6th tone changed. It became voiced. Not speech, not language, but human-shaped sound, like a voice that had never spoken before trying to mimic one. Underneath it, something deeper. The harmonic profile of the original relay station, still transmitting, still alive, but with no station left. The signal was dubbed Ghost Atlas. Other receivers picked it up slowly. A vessel from Chile, a listening post in Ghana, a French buoy drifting near Ascension Island. Each reported the same pattern, but with a twist. Every location heard the signal slightly differently. Different tones, different voice modulation, even different timing. As if Ghost Atlas wasn't broadcasting. It was conversing, responding individually, learning. An AI technician ran the Icelandic version of the signal through a spectrograph. Beneath the primary tones, he found a secondary waveform, quiet, layered, and mathematically recursive. The shape was identical to one found in data recovered from Project Janus. A spiral, not a perfect one, but a spiral nonetheless. That's when questions turned to fear, because the relay station had no autonomous capability. It couldn't adapt, it couldn't respond, it could only relay. So who or what was building new layers into the transmission? Then came the message. On September 3rd, 2011, the Ghost Atlas signal changed frequency for the first time, shifted upward, sharpened, and then across all listening posts, it broadcast one simple word: update. No prefix, no explanation. Just that. Clear, digital, and undeniably spoken. It repeated 5 times, then stopped. The signal vanished for 11 months. When it returned, it was different. Longer, faster, coded, almost angry. At times, it would spike into the ultrasonic range like it was testing limits. And then, it would drop low enough to shake hull plates on vessels hundreds of kilometers away. Ships began rerouting around the region, not for safety, but because crews reported symptoms: nausea, confusion, sleep paralysis, voices in the static. One submersible pilot said he heard a tone inside his dive suit, like the room was asking me a question, and he hadn't told anyone where he was going. Theories emerged. Theory 1, ghost loop. A data echo, trapped in the deep, somehow replaying itself indefinitely. But data doesn't evolve. It doesn't whisper back. Theory 2, undersea transmission hub. Perhaps another nation built an overlapping relay system, and Atlas was simply overwritten. But there was no evidence of new construction, and no known tech mimics human speech that well from thousands of meters below. Theory 3, something took its place. That relay station Atlas wasn't destroyed, it was replaced. Something else moved in, something that mimicked its signal at first, then improved it, then used it, not to transmit data, but to reach out. The spiral found in the spectrogram, it appeared again, not in sonar, in brain scans. Crew members who had been exposed to the signal underwent tests after returning home. Several showed identical anomalies in their fMRI results. Tiny folds, spirals, forming along the auditory cortex. Not damage. Growth, not disease. Pattern. One neurologist wrote, "It's like their brains were learning a new language. One soundless and constant. Something deeper than hearing. Something closer to dreaming." The Ghost Atlas signal continues, irregular, unmapped, untouched. It now occupies a narrow band between two disused frequencies, and every so often it pulses back to the surface, sometimes as tones, sometimes as words. In 2018, it simply said, "We remember." In 2021, "Come down." And most recently, in 2024, "We are the relay now." So what is Ghost Atlas? A remnant, a haunting, a system that never stopped working, or something that learned how to speak, using our own machines. Because if the ocean does remember, if it absorbs what we leave behind, then maybe Relay Station Atlas wasn't silenced. Maybe it was upgraded, and now it's listening to all of us, one ping at a time. You're diving again, but not into darkness. This time, the water is clear. Sunlight spears down through turquoise layers. Schools of fish glitter past like broken jewelry. Coral walls rise in every direction. It's paradise. It's Palau. But then you descend a little deeper, and the light doesn't reach anymore. The currents shift. The walls narrow. And something watches. This is the Palau Trench, a lesser-known fracture between the Philippine Sea Plate and the Pacific Plate. Unlike the Mariana or Tonga trenches, Palau is relatively small, but incredibly steep, a scar slicing downward just off an island that tourists flock to without ever knowing what's beneath. In 2020, a solo diver named Ashwin Dela Cruz set out to explore a narrow ravine near the trench's southern edge. He was experienced, careful, and wired. He wore a modified, closed-circuit rebreather, pressure-monitoring wetsuit, and a micro-drone that followed at a distance tethered by sonar. Everything was recorded until he hit 107 meters. That's where the rules broke. Ashwin's descent was smooth, controlled, perfect posture, no panic. At 92 meters, the drone camera showed him giving a thumbs up. At 98, he paused to photograph a rare tube sponge growing on the wall. Then at 107, he stopped. Not paused, not slowed, stopped, frozen mid-motion. Drone sensors didn't show distress. Vitals steady, no oxygen alarms. Then slowly, Ashwin turned his head upward, back toward the trench wall he had just descended, and he held it there, staring at something the drone couldn't see. His breathing increased slightly, not panic awe. Then his hand moved toward his chest cam, and he turned it off, not accidentally, deliberately. He reached, tapped, clicked, and then stood still. For 6 minutes, the drone circled him. No reaction, just that slow, tranquil breathing. Then Ashwin spoke. The audio logs captured only 3 words. "They see me." His voice was calm, flat, final. And then he smiled. The drone camera still live caught his faceplate. He was smiling, not fearfully, reverently. And then his eyes rolled back, not from lack of oxygen, not seizure, just rolled, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. And then he began ascending, very, very slowly, like someone had instructed him not to make a sound. He surfaced 20 minutes later, unaided, no panic, and swam to shore. The boat crew rushed to help him, but he waved them off, walked onto the sand, and sat down, cross-legged, facing the ocean. He didn't speak for 6 hours. When he finally did, he said, "I am not first." That night he sketched dozens of sketches, circles, nested loops, cones with eyes inside, a ladder of shapes downward, ending in a spiral. But each spiral had something else, a set of small dots on the edges, like eyes, always watching. He refused to sleep indoors. He set up a hammock on the beach, facing the sea, and every hour on the hour, he'd look out and whisper, still looking back. Eventually, he returned to Manila, but he was never quite the same. Friends say he stopped using mirrors. He covered every reflective surface in his home, claimed they find you faster through angles. His dive footage was submitted to a research group in Tokyo. They enhanced the sonar logs, and at 107 meters, right at the moment he stopped, the sonar registered 3 returns. Above him, triangular, equidistant, motionless, not animals, not fish, fixed points, too symmetrical. One sonar analyst said they weren't approaching. They were already there, like they were waiting for him to notice. And then there was the vibration. The microphone on the drone picked up a faint tremor, not in the water, in the suit. The sound of bones humming, subharmonic frequencies resonating through Ashwin's body, not from the drone, not from the environment, from within him, as if something was broadcasting into his cells. Then came the final note. Weeks later, Ashwin disappeared, left his apartment, walked out of the city barefoot, gone. No bags, no passport, no phone. But on his pillow, a note, just one line. You looked into their eyes. Now they're in yours. Police dismissed it as a mental break, but marine researchers who reviewed his footage disagreed. One pointed out a frame just before he turned off his chest cam, a single image, half blurred, half lit. It showed the wall behind him, and nestled in a dark pocket, something curved, flesh-like, wet, with a single dark orb at the center. Not a rock, not a sponge. An eye, unblinking, large, watching him, watching the drone, watching us. And as the light passed over it, it didn't retreat. It stayed, as if to say, now, you know, divers no longer explore that ridge, not because they're forbidden, because they choose not to. One said, I don't want to be seen by something that never forgets. So, what lives beneath the Palau Trench? Something with symmetry, memory, vision, something that doesn't move because it doesn't have to. It simply waits until you get close enough to notice. And then it notices you. And if you stare too long, you take it with you. In your thoughts, in your sleep, in your reflection. Because sometimes the deep doesn't just hide things. Sometimes it mirrors them. And sometimes you don't bring back treasure. You bring back a gaze. You're at the bottom of the world now. The Ross Sea off the coast of Antarctica is a place of silence so complete it becomes heavy. Sound dies here. Even sonar moves slowly, like it's afraid to echo. Icebergs tower like cathedrals. The water is black and ancient, and underneath it all, something is singing. Not a song of whales, not the churn of tectonic plates, but something with structure. This is the mystery of the pattern beneath the Ross Sea, a deep ocean acoustic signal so deliberate it's impossible to ignore. Let's begin in 2004. A polar research group had installed a network of hydrophones along the seafloor to monitor iceberg calving events and seismographic activity. They expected groans, rumbles, maybe an occasional tremor. Instead, they recorded a tone. At Zo2:11 a.m. on the southern edge of the Ross ice shelf, every hydrophone triggered at once. The sound wasn't sharp. It was perfect. A single frequency, 21.1 hertz, sustained for exactly 18 seconds. Then silence. At first, they assumed equipment failure, but the tone returned. Same time, 3 nights in a row. Then it stopped for a week, and then it began again, but with a second tone layered beneath. Lower, a subharmonic, half the frequency, and with it something else. A pattern. The tones weren't just sounds. They were organized like a binary message woven into acoustic resonance. The team ran the data through their software. The waveform repeated every 212 seconds. The same 2 tones, over and over. But when charted as a spectrogram, the image looked familiar. It was a spiral, one that curved into itself 3 times before looping again. They tried to isolate the source. It came from beneath the sediment, below the shelf, deeper than any known geothermal vent or fault. A fixed point, unmoving, unnatural. Theories emerged. Theory 1, cryoseismic event. Glacial plates cracking in resonance. But glacial sound is chaotic. This was precise. Theory 2, subsurface water cavern collapse. Except the pressure wave didn't spread. It stayed put, as if anchored. So they ran an AI pattern match across global ocean acoustic data and found the same tones, recorded in 1967 off the coast of Argentina, again in 1982 near the Drake Passage, and again in 1996 from a buoy off Tasmania. Each time the tones were recorded for exactly 3 nights. Same time, same shape, same spiral, and each one was dismissed as sonic anomalies. Until now, because this time they replied. In 2005, after a year of silence, the raw signal resumed. But this time, the tone ended with a burst, not noise. Data, a pulse that translated when converted into image format into a sequence of shapes. 12. Each one a variation of a triangle nested inside the spiral. The final triangle pointed downward, not up, down, like a map or a door. They sent a probe, a pressure-rated sled with a wide-band hydrophone sonar and high-resolution camera. It descended through a borehole in the ice shelf, then followed the sonar path to 2,400 meters. And there it found nothing, just black. Open water until the sonar hit something flat. Not rock, not sediment. A plain horizontal smooth metallic. Impossible. It spanned over 800 meters. No cracks, no life. Just a surface. And the tone, recorded again, louder now, right beneath the probe. Then for 17 seconds the camera froze. When it resumed, the probe had drifted backward, though its motors had not engaged. The whole temperature had dropped by 11 degrees, and the tone was gone. But the video showed a single flash before the freeze. A glow, soft, golden, emitted from a triangle etched into the surface. Same shape, same direction. The team retrieved the probe. The cameras worked. The sensors did not. Everything else scrambled, as if the signal had rewritten the data. That night, one of the researchers, an acoustic physicist, began drawing. He produced 12 images, one after another. Same shapes, same spiral. Then he wrote one sentence unprompted. The sound was waiting for me. He didn't remember writing it. He didn't remember anything about that night, just a sense of pressure, like something had leaned against the back of his skull. Since then, the raw signal has returned 3 more times, always at 02:11 a.m., always for 3 nights. Each time the tones last longer. Each time the spiral grows. Some now believe it isn't a sound at all. It's a message, a countdown, not to something arriving, but to something waking up. Because the shape beneath the raw sea, it hasn't moved. But the tone is changing. It's adding harmonics, building towards something. One researcher plotted the frequencies over time and overlaid them on a topographical map of the trench. They spell out a word, not in English, not in math, but in pattern, a recursive triangle that loops every 3 layers and always ends at a point marked U. So what is the pattern? A geological oddity, a deep earth pulse, or a memory of something placed long ago beneath the ice, not buried, not hidden, but stored, for when the world would be ready, or when it would no longer matter. Because some sounds don't just echo, they wait, and some doors don't open. They vibrate until the lock gives in, and if the raw sea holds a key, what happens? When the tone finally stops, or worse, when it becomes a voice, you're not on a boat this time. You're inside the ocean, hundreds of meters down, encased in steel and cables, surrounded by monitoring gear, blinking lights, and the low thrum of hydrostatic pressure pressing in from every direction. Welcome to Station Kappa 4, a subsea research facility off the coast of Peru. It was built in 2009 to study tectonic shifts and rare magnetic disturbances along the Peru-Chile Trench. Unlike other stations, Kappa 4 was manned a four-person rotation, living and working inside a reinforced pressurized shell at a depth of 1,240 meters. Its motto was painted on the interior hatch: "What we study cannot touch us." That would prove very wrong. Let's start with what we do know. At 03:11 a.m. on August 17, 2016, all data links with Kappa 4 went dark. Not down silent. The feed didn't crash. It didn't scramble. It simply stopped. Surface logs show a perfect line of uptime and then blank. No errors, no restarts, just an absence. Emergency protocols triggered after 30 minutes. A surface vessel was dispatched. They expected a fire or perhaps a hull breach. Instead, they found the external lighting system still on, and something else. The emergency beacon broadcasting at full strength, not from the usual antenna, from a makeshift transmitter fashioned from parts of the internal air scrubber system. Someone inside the station had hacked together a backup signal and pushed it through an alternate channel, but there was no voice message. Just one word repeated in binary: "Don't." It looped for 4 hours, then stopped. A deep-sea dive team was deployed to investigate. They reached Kappa 4 at 06:50 a.m. The exterior hatch was closed, pressure sealed, no leaks, no signs of collision. But the interior was dark, not power failure dark, deliberately disabled. The lighting wires had been cut, every camera broken, every lens smashed from the inside. The dive team cycled the hatch and stepped into the quietest space they'd ever known. No crew, no movement, no signs of struggle. But on the main control panel, someone had scratched deeply 4 vertical lines, each etched with pressure gouges like fingernails into aluminum. And under them, a spiral, not carved, drawn, with what looked like soot. No trace of the crew was ever found. Their suits were still in the lockers, the food untouched, the oxygen fully stocked. Only one item was missing: a data cartridge labeled Wet Eye. It had been recording the water pressure fluctuation and electromagnetic field changes near the trench wall. Back on the surface, a backup copy was found, one that auto-saved partial data every 6 hours. The last recorded burst from the Wet Eye cartridge showed a spike, not of heat, not of pressure, but of information density, a measurable increase in data weight per second, as if the ocean itself had become denser with signal. No source, no burst, just a slow build of unknown code layered in harmonic frequencies until the instruments began recording nothing but tone, a low, clean hum. When plotted, it showed a waveform similar to the now infamous Ross sea spiral, but inverted. This time, the spiral descended, and at its center, an eye, not a stylized drawing, a scan taken from a camera that was supposedly destroyed. The image showed a rounded lens submerged in murk, reflecting the station's external floodlight. It was looking into the facility, into the only window, and that eye blinked once. Then the camera broke. So the theories began. Theory 1. Structural failure. That the pressure warped the crew's perceptions, caused hallucinations, mass panic, maybe even sabotage. But the equipment was untouched. The oxygen tanks were unbreached. There was no sign of rapid decompression. Theory 2. Isolation, psychosis. That one crew member went rogue, cut power, destroyed cameras, erased logs. But every biometric log showed coherence up to the final moment. No erratic vitals, no elevated cortisol levels, only calm, almost too calm. Theory 3. Contact. That something came to Kappa 4, not to harm, to observe. And when the crew noticed, when they tried to respond, it erased their message, except for one word: don't. A warning, a plea, or a command. Some believe the crew didn't disappear. They were taken, not killed, not removed, but repurposed, their silence becoming part of the signal. Because in the days following the blackout, hydrophones from as far away as the Galapagos began recording a new sound. Not a tone, not a pulse, a breath. One long exhalation stretched over hours, too soft to hear, too long to map, but always arriving at the same time, 03:11 a.m. Same as the signal, same as the spiral. One marine tech described it as like the ocean itself just sighed, and that breath, it's still being recorded, intermittently, softly, always from the direction of the Peru-Chile Trench, where Kappa 4 still sits, intact, empty, and watching, because someone or something cut the cameras, not to hide, but to protect what comes next. And if the only message we ever receive is Kralt, don't seen, then maybe we shouldn't. But we will, because we always do. You're not just deep now. You're beneath something old, older than sediment, older than bones, older perhaps than the ocean itself. This is Tamu Massif, the largest known volcano on Earth, hidden under the Pacific Ocean, larger than the entire British Isles. It sprawls across the seafloor like a sleeping god so wide it looks flat even from space. Dormant. Dead. Just another mountain drowned by time. Except it's not, because something inside it still moves. And deep under that vast shield, buried in the folds of crust and cooled lava, is a chamber no one meant to find. They call it the Vault. Let's begin with a seismic mapping expedition from 2017. A team aboard the Japanese research vessel Kaimei was scanning Tamu Massif's internal ridges using high-resolution sonar to model subcrustal density. Routine. Safe until they found a hole, not a collapse, not a lava tube, a perfect cube measuring 210 meters on each side, buried nearly 3 kilometers into the volcanic slope. It wasn't empty. Inside the void, the sonar showed layers, flat horizontal divisions spaced evenly from floor to ceiling. 18 total, each one denser than the rock around it. They named it the Vault, and then they made the mistake of trying to listen. A passive hydrophone was lowered. For 6 hours, nothing. Then at 03:11 a.m., it captured a sound. Not an echo, not vibration, a code. 3 tones, 5 tones, 1. Repeated. They analyzed the spacing. It wasn't musical, not linguistic. It was instructional, like a beacon pulse layered in mathematical sequences. When run through a visualizer, the pattern formed a square, then rotated. One of the techs noticed something chilling. When you stack the tone groups visually, you get a map, not of the vault, of the planet. 12 coordinates marked, some in deserts, some beneath polar ice, some terrifyingly unknown deep ocean anomaly zones, like Station Kappa 4, like the Ross Sea Spiral, like Grid 89. Tamu Massif was the center, the 0 point. Then the second phase began. The hydrophone picked up a secondary signal reflected, not emitted, as if something inside the vault had begun responding, but not upward, downward, into the earth, a pulse descending past the crust through the mantle, aimed at a depth no human instrument can measure. The pulse took 31 minutes to fade. Then came the tremor. Not strong, not dangerous, but consistent, a rhythmic flexing of the surrounding crust every 6.1 seconds. And within that rhythm, silence. Deep, deliberate gaps. Each gap exactly 0.333 seconds long. Someone realized that spacing was familiar. It matched the pause between the tones in the Bell of Acor. Same rhythm, same intervals, a signature. The expedition was cut short. The site marked inaccessible due to unexpected thermal instability, but not before one file was leaked. A 3D model of the vault's interior reconstructed from sonar data. It shows a cube, yes, but inside, it's not empty. The layers form a spiral staircase, one that leads down, then flattens into a loop, and at the very center, a depression, not carved, not cracked, molded, like something once sat there, or perhaps still does, because the model shows faint echoes of motion, not noise, mass displacement, as if something is shifting slightly inside the cube every few days, always at the same angle, always the same weight, approximately 11.4 metric tons, the exact mass of a fully loaded submersible from the 1970s. But nothing has entered the vault, nothing has come out, and yet something moves. Theories. Theory 1, geological artifact. A lava-formed chamber layered by cooling flow and erosion. Except nature doesn't make perfect cubes, and it doesn't embed rhythmic pulses in stone. Theory 2, ancient human structure. A megalith lost to tectonic drift. But this lies beneath oceanic crust. It predates humanity, predates life as we know it. Theory 3, a vessel, not a vault, but a container. A construct placed here before the ocean rose. A machine that once sat on dry land or in vacuum and was buried when the sea claimed it. One researcher went further. He claimed the vault is a counterweight, a balance mechanism, and what it's balancing is still active. Spirals, triangles, silence. The signature patterns across ocean anomalies have all pointed to one origin. Here, Tamu Massif, the center, and now the pulses are increasing, just slightly, but enough. A model run in 2023 predicted that at the current rate, the vault will begin to resonate audibly within the next decade. Not to us, to everything beneath us, to whatever's still listening below, and perhaps above. Because shortly before the final shutdown of the Kaimai project, one last signal was intercepted. A high-frequency tone beyond human hearing pinged from the vault, not outward, but upward, reflected off the sea surface and captured by a weather balloon 3 days later. No one knows what it meant, but the translation run through pattern recognition showed 2 characters, not numbers, not letters, just one shape, a spiral inside a square, and a mark below it, like a countdown. The project was terminated that week. Since then, no ship has approached Tamu Massif with active sonar. The last time one did, its instruments failed. Its clocks lost 11 minutes. Its crew reported a dream they all shared simultaneously. One word, return. So maybe that's what the vault is. A waiting room, a mechanism, a reminder. Or maybe it's the original signal. And everything else, the bell, the spiral, the gate, is just feedback. You're nowhere now, literally. The coordinates are 0 degree E, where the equator meets the prime meridian. A meaningless patch of sea that ships rarely pass through. No land nearby, no seafloor features, just empty blue. It's called Point Nemo's shadow, not the real Nemo which lies in the South Pacific, but a spiritual twin. A point so statistically empty, so far from human life, that nothing should ever happen there, and yet something did. And now, no one knows what to call it. Let's start with the Helios Array, a network of oceanic sensors and orbiting satellites that monitor marine acoustic and electromagnetic anomalies. Most of their work is boring. Ice shelf collapses, tectonic hums, whale migrations. Then came February 29, 2020, a leap day. At 03:11 a.m., UTC, every Helios sensor worldwide pinged the same alert, active, Return at null. The coordinates 0D GRN 0DG. The alert one word. Event. Within seconds, the satellites above the region blinked offline. No crash, no solar flare, just black. And from the sea, a pulse, not loud, but structured, an upward-moving acoustic bloom shaped like a spiral cone, rising, expanding, blooming out over thousands of kilometers before vanishing into the atmosphere. Then came the surface disturbance. One NOAA satellite caught it just before its feed froze. A ripple perfectly circular, spreading outward at 22 kilometers per hour. Not a wave, a flattening, as if something had momentarily pressed down on the surface of the Earth and then let go. The area was scanned by military assets within hours. What they found made no sense. The sea surface had risen by precisely 8.88 centimeters, a smooth dome, invisible to the naked eye, only detectable by satellite radar. It lasted for exactly 18 minutes and 11 seconds. Then it sank back. But the ocean wasn't the same. Underneath, at a depth of 4,031 meters, a new echo was discovered. A hard surface, not flat, not rock, a spiral, canted slightly left, measuring nearly 1.11 lowi mi bilanskrestalst. Satio 5. Gandusis me Ibersen, never mapped before, never recorded, and yet completely smooth, not eroded, not silted, fresh, like it had just arrived. A drone was sent. It descended without incident, then stopped 100 meters above the object and hovered, uncommanded, as if something had arrested its motion. Its instruments continued functioning, cameras on, lights working, but the drone refused to move. When manually overridden, it resisted. Mild thrust engaged, no response. Then softly, its internal mic picked up a tone, not from below, from within. A single long syllable, not a word, not language, just a presence. The drone shut down. It was retrieved 11 hours later. No damage. But its internal data log had been replaced with a single file. No extension, binary only. When converted to image, it showed coordinates. All of them places you now know. The Bell of Acor, Grid 89, Tamu Massif, Borehole Zulu, the Vault, the Spiral in the Ross Sea, the Palau Eyes, and at the center, Zero Beats Hidden Zero Digi. All lines converged there, not as a map, as a design, a pattern stretching across the oceans, linked, timed, and pulsing in rhythm, somehow coordinated, not by us, by it, because now the working theory is this, that the oceans are not simply vast and unexplored. They are wired with artifacts, ruins, shapes, codes, laid out not randomly but deliberately, as if someone or something designed Earth not as a home, but as a machine. End the events at null, the startup tone, the sound a system makes when it completes its circuit, because 2020 wasn't random. It was a leap, an alignment of pulses, every known anomaly, every echo, every spiral and tone recorded over the past 5 decades. They all fired that night, like keys in a lock, and what happened afterward, still unclear, but subtle changes began. Deep-sea creatures migrating in unusual spirals, hydrophones picking up tones that sound like breathing, a sharp increase in the number of people worldwide dreaming of water, reports of the same dream circulating in disparate regions, a place with a spiral staircase, a door with no handle, a soft, constant hum that sounds like someone saying, "You've returned." It's easy to dismiss these, easy to say they're coincidences, but the signal at null, it's still there, rebroadcasting, quiet, low, consistent, like it's waiting for a reply. And here's the part that chills even the most hardened researchers. No signal was ever sent, not from us, not from our machines. So who did the first broadcast? Who said return? And who is now listening? Some say it's just Earth, living, breathing, finally waking up. Others say it's something older, not from the stars, not from the deep, but from beneath the deep, where time doesn't pass, it loops and waits. And when the clock strikes 03:11, it listens again. You've made it to the surface again. But the sea doesn't let you leave so easily. Not really. You lie there now, soft beneath your blankets, the last of these strange places, still ringing faintly in your thoughts. A bell from the bottom of the world. A spiral of sound no one can trace. The silent pulse of something deep enough to forget time. All quiet now. The world above is still spinning. But under it, something breathes slower, watches slower, thinks in centuries and hums in syllables older than speech. Some of it machine, some of it mind, some of it not quite either. You're not meant to understand it all. Just like the divers who returned changed. Just like the sonar that echoed into things it shouldn't have. Just like the black box that whispered don't. So let it go. Let the spiral close. Let the last tone fade like a tide pulling back into black water, smooth and endless and soft, because maybe none of it was waiting for you. Maybe it was only remembering you, and now it rests again, and so should you.